Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are in the world, to this conference on volunteering and global citizenship, brought to you by the McConnell International Foundation in partnership with the Scottish Government. My name's David Lee, and I'm simply here to chair today's event and to ensure, hopefully, that things go smoothly and to ask some questions of our experts. I hope that you'll all contribute throughout the event by asking questions and making comments in the chat box at any time. Please mute your microphones so as not to distract from our excellent range of speakers, but please feel free to keep your cameras on if you wish. I'll talk a little more about the structure of the event later, but first of all, I'm going to welcome our first speaker to introduce the event, and that is the Right Honourable Lord Jack McConnell, who has a very keen interest in this subject. He founded the McConnell International Foundation in 2012 and is currently co-chair of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group on the UN Global Goals for Sustainable Development, and is Vice President of UNICEF UK. So over to you, Lord McConnell, to kick off the day.
Well, thank you very much, David, and a huge thanks to all those, including Susan Dalgety, who've done so much work to bring this conference to us today.
I'm
absolutely delighted to be welcoming you all, and I'm delighted that the conference is now happening. We debated and discussed the need for a conference such as this during the pandemic, and I'm very grateful to the Scottish Government for their support and endorsement of our discussions today. Looking forward to welcoming Christina McKelvie, the Minister, to speak shortly. I'd also like to give a particular welcome to my good friend Vera from Malawi, who is currently Tourism Minister, but has served in many roles in that country over the years, and looking forward to hearing what she has to say. At the McConnell International Foundation, we've had an interest in volunteering from our very beginnings as a foundation 10 years ago, when our very first programme was the Livingston Volunteers. Livingston Volunteers was not organising international volunteering directly, but it was in response to my experience of organised volunteering from the UK to Southern Africa, where almost always there was quite a significant cost involved for the individuals, whether they were from schools or universities or colleges or from the workplace or just generally volunteering with an organisation. People had to raise a significant amount of money to participate in volunteering. And we wanted to make sure that people from any background could have the same possibility to take part. And for 10 years, we supported dozens of individuals who might not otherwise have managed to take part in volunteering internationally to raise their funds and to have that experience, including on one occasion, ensuring that someone could take their carer with them. And that they had the same opportunity as people who were more able-bodied than them. So we've had a long commitment to this, but we were very aware of three huge factors: the problems with international travel during the pandemic and the cost and availability of international travel since, the issue of climate and the impact international travel has on our climate, and then of course the very valid concerns about voluntourism and whether or not volunteering is in fact beneficial and respectful to host communities, and whether it's mutual in both directions, not just from the north to the south. So with these three concerns in mind, we wanted to bring together individuals who've got experience of volunteering or are interested in volunteering, organizations that organize volunteers, organizations that host volunteers, and others with a very direct interest here today. Delighted so many people have signed up for the conference And in opening the conference, I just want to say that I think there are three very, very important principles here. The first one is that, for me, international volunteering, encouraging young people in particular to travel around the world, get different kinds of experiences, make friends, understand the world better. Whether those young people are traveling from the north to the south or from the south to the north, that is a valid and good thing. And I start from that premise that we should be positive about volunteering and want to make it happen in the best possible way. The second thing that I think is absolutely critical is that any volunteering is carried out in an atmosphere of mutual respect, and preferably for mutual benefit of all concerned, so that we have the development not just of good citizens, but sometimes of a good legacy, and that those who take part are treated respectfully, host communities are treated respectfully, and that in working together in that way, we help create a better world for all. And the third and final point I would make in introducing the conference, which I feel particularly strongly about, is that access to volunteering opportunities has to be equitable. It cannot be only for those who can afford that opportunity. We can see in these days of social media photographs and stories from all over the world of people who have a lot of personal resources and backup from their family, who enjoy their gap years or their traveling time between school and work, or school and university, or just simply taking a break. And that's fine. But these opportunities must exist for everybody. They must exist, I believe, this is recognized by many organizations, including VSO. They must exist for young people in the global south to be able to gain those experiences in other countries. And they must exist for people in developed countries like Scotland and the UK, where disadvantaged young people should not be disadvantaged from this opportunity. They should have the same opportunity as anybody else. So I believe that these three principles, first of all, that volunteering is a very good thing. Secondly, that it should be conducted in an atmosphere of mutual respect. And thirdly, that it must be equitable, would be a good start for our discussions today. I hope so. I hope that will be the case. I wish you well. Thank all the speakers and everybody who's joined us today. I think it's going to be a fascinating opportunity to have an open discussion and then to follow up early in 2024 with the production of a report and some guidelines that can then be used by organizations and people who want to build these opportunities in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Lord McConnell. Our second scene-setting speaker is the Honourable Vera Kamtukule, who is currently Minister for Tourism in the Malawi government, having also served as Labour Minister and Deputy Minister. She's got more than 15 years of experience in programme management at senior level and was CEO of the Malawi and Scotland Partnership for 3 years before joining the government of Malawi in 2020. The Honourable Vera Kamtukule, over to you.
No, thank you very much. I was very much delighted when I was told that I was going to be speaking at this meeting. I don't know if you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yes, Vera, thank you.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so I think the theme of this event is about how international volunteering can contribute towards school partnerships and issues of global citizenship. And I think for me, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was that I think the Malawi-Scotland Partnership and the Scotland-Malawi Partnership work that is supported by the Scottish government pretty much sets the tone as far as global citizenship and school partnerships and volunteering issues are concerned. I say that because we talk about the partnership principles. We say these are relationships that are built on mutual respect, you know, on friendship, on they're mutually beneficial. So it's not just somebody that is from the UK or from Scotland or from Malawi that is benefiting. Each one of us is benefiting. But I think for me, it's about the how this is being done. We need to discuss those things. When I was at the Malawi-Scotland Partnership, I would host a number of teachers, students from Scotland coming to Malawi, and I would take them around to schools, and we get reports from how school partnerships are working. Some of them would come into our office, some of them would not, but would get reports anyway. Or when we have events at regional level or at national level, would have these reports that are coming in on how the school partnerships are moving on and whatever it is. I think for me, what was striking would be how this was being done. So the fundamentals of doing a school partnership or volunteering are very, very good. However, it would be how this is being done, and that would have an effect on the counterparts in Malawi, for example. I remember taking a group of teachers and students to a certain school. And then after I did my opening remarks, and then the teachers put me aside and said, "Excuse me, what do you expect us to teach the white people?" And I said, there's a lot that you can teach the white people. This is a teacher that is teaching in Scotland. She only teaches 25 students that have access to internet, computers, everything. Her salary is paid on the 20th of every month and whatever. You, on the other hand, are teaching 220 students in one class. They are diverse students, slow learners, the unruly, the fast learners, everyone. And you only have a textbook in your hands, and a chalk and a blackboard. That's all you have. And this is a system that has produced people like me. I went through the same system. I said, surely there's something that you can teach your counterparts in Scotland. Surely I want to believe that. And until I said that, I didn't see that they had something that they could teach their counterparts in Scotland. Now it's about resilience. It's about the tenacity to do this thing with so little. And there's one man that I met when I came to an AGM in Scotland one time before, hosted by the SMP. He said, I could not believe how our counterparts in Malawi are able to get an education with so little. At that point, he may not have gotten anything else, but I believe that young man, his life will never be the same. And because he was exposed to something like that, he goes on to become a better person. That's what global citizenship is all about. The consciousness that you get to say, I am part of the global citizenship. I am part of the globe. I am part of the world. What is it that I bring onto the table that can change somebody else's life, even though my counterpart socioeconomically will be miles away from me? But when we're talking about global citizenship, it has absolutely nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with your attitude, your perceptions towards doing things. Now, when I zero it in down to Malawi now, we sat down as a nation and decided on how we're going to do our development. So we have the Malawi 2063. So that's a blueprint for our development. It has everything that you need to know about health, education, everything, socioeconomically, how we're going to handle issues of environment, climate change, and everything else. And I want to believe that school partnerships is part of that agenda. However, how are we going to do this thing? So when you're coming from Scotland, UK, or wherever globally, coming into Malawi, or any African country for that matter, the mutual respect and friendship basis or principles dictates that you need to understand the fundamentals of how development looks like to the people that are involved. So you cannot just come from Scotland and say, oh, we're going to work with Malawians, their education is not going on so well, so we're going to build a school block. When a school block is not really what they want. And then there's this whole issue of transparency, accountability, and fairness, where fairness in this case means, if you're coming to build a school block in one area in Malawi, are the standards that you are exerting on that construction project similar to those that you would do in your own country? If not, because it's just not about having a school block, you have to build for durability, for sustainability also. So it's not just about, we contributed towards a purchase of books or construction of a library, construction of a school block. Is that school block going to pass the parameters or the I don't know what they call it in Scotland, or the standards of building standards of construction in Scotland? If the answer is no, then I don't think it's also good for Malawi. So that's the whole thing that we're talking about, where in the first place, how are you going to do the volunteering? How or at what point do you start volunteering or helping out? Because those are different things. Now, the other thing is that at the back of your mind, you always have to answer this question: is it mutually beneficial? Are you just doing this as a charity or out of the goodness of your heart, or are you also benefiting something from them? If you're not benefiting anything, even if it's just inspiration, then I don't think it's worth even doing it. So for me, I want to believe, going back to what the work that Malawi-Scotland Partnership and Scotland-Malawi Partnership is doing, supported by the Scottish government, and now supported by the Foundation for Lord McConnell. I want to believe that there's a room for us to change the trajectory as far as how things have been done are concerned. We have been working, the model has already been set, the blueprint has already been set, but now I think moving forward, we need to understand to say the fundamentals that we've been using up to this level, how do we build them up now to incorporate issues of climate change, for example? In Malawi, this year, we suffered the Cyclone Freddy. Over 1,000 human beings were lost. Over 500,000 people were displaced, and total devastation on our infrastructure. We need close to $1 billion United States dollars for us to rebuild from that. And just I think about a couple of weeks ago, there was a storm and floods in Scotland. How are Malawians going to contribute towards the rebuilding of Scotland? So it's just not about when Malawi has an issue where the Scots now are coming to Malawi. It's about how we are exchanging that kind of information to ensure that we are having mutually beneficial relationships, but also that we are using our experiences from both ends to build the global citizenry. So these, for me, these are fundamentals that we need to look at as we go ahead, even as we discuss here to say, where do we start from? For me, the key issue with the school partnerships is we are nipping in the bud the young people that are rising, the next generation that we are raising. We are nipping it in the bud to say, you have a responsibility to contribute towards world peace, for example, climate change, the fight against climate change, the fight against HIV and AIDS, the promotion of peace in the world. But how do you do it? It's when you are engaging yourself with the counterparts from another angle, from another planet, not from another planet, but from another place. So the north and west coming in together, but built by one issue. What is that issue? We are both human beings. And until we reach those levels of consciousness, then volunteering will not really make sense. So I was only given 5 minutes to do my remarks, and I would like to submit back to the moderator at the moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed there to the Honourable Vera Kamtukule for some really passionate remarks there that have given us a great start to the day. Some of the key themes there from both Lord McConnell and Vera Kamtukule around how do we make volunteering in 2023 and beyond fair and equitable? How do we make sure it's mutually beneficial and it is a genuine two-way street? How do we make it transparent? And a really interesting point there from Vera Kamtukule about it's not just about money, but it's about attitudes and perceptions. So quite a number of themes there to address further throughout the day. Just a little bit more about how things are going to run. As Jack McConnell said, today's event is part of a process of gathering ideas to produce guidelines for the future of volunteering, international volunteering and global citizenship. A survey has been sent to you ahead of the event, which I hope some of you have filled in. You'll get a post-event survey too. And I'd really encourage you to contribute throughout the day. I see a lot of people introducing themselves, which is great. If you've got comments on what our speakers have said, particularly any of the points made already, stick them in the chat box. And if you have any questions, pop them in there as well. I will try and get through as many questions as possible to our various speakers throughout the day. As soon as you think of a question, stick it in there. Don't wait till the end when we're running out of time. And I'll keep an eye. I'll ask as many questions as possible. If you would like to come in and ask a question, say, can I please ask a question on, summarize the topic very briefly, and I'll try and bring you in. But don't unmute yourself until I invite you to ask a question, please. So thanks very much to our speakers so far. And without further ado, we'll move on. Our next contributor is Christina McKelvie, MSP. She was appointed as the Scottish Government's Minister for Culture, Europe and International Development in March. And Christina is going to give some opening comments, and then we'll open up for a slightly longer period of questions too. So please welcome Christina McKelvie, MSP.
Thank you very much, David, and Honourable Minister, Lord McConnell, partners, members and guests. Really pleased to join you this morning to welcome you to the conference on volunteering on global citizenship. I would firstly like to thank the team at the McConnell International Foundation for bringing us all together today, and to Lord McConnell and the co-chair, the Honourable Vera Kamtukule, Minister for Tourism in Malawi, for facilitating such an important discussion. And I think the Honourable Vera Kamtukule has really set the scene for the day, and you know, and how we equalise power. And that's an issue that I'm working on in government as we speak. The topic of youth volunteering, or is it voluntourism, as it has become known, and how to manage it is, well, in one which I know many in the sector have long grappled with. Even prior to the impact on travel by COVID-19, we were thinking about the future of volunteerism, about climate change, safeguarding issues, the purpose of youth volunteering, and the models of voluntourism. For our part, in 2019, the Scottish Government has provided a small grant to STECA, Skill in Malawi, to test the feasibility of a new model of dignified voluntourism. STECA were looking to counter accusations of poverty tourism and white saviour complex, sometimes aimed at this type of activity. At that time, we also commissioned a report on school partnership and school visits in a global citizenship context, which we published in October 2020. And I'm delighted that its author, Dr. Emma Arts, is here to present on that today. Please take the time to hear from her. It's an excellent piece of work. However, adding to that pre-existing challenge as we meet today, the world looks in many ways very different to how it did pre-pandemic. Sadly, we are facing ever-increasing threats, from the invasion of Ukraine to the increasing humanitarian crisis in the Middle East, and new ever-changing challenges from existing and emerging disease burdens. Those threats and challenges mean it is more important than ever that we consider whether there is still a place for volunteerism in today's climate. And I'm hearing the Honourable Vera's words in my head as I say that, and thinking about how we develop the work that we are doing. And you know, if there is a good framework, what does a good framework or a model for volunteerism look like? And how do we harness the enthusiasm and energy of young people who want to travel to Africa and other continents, to broaden their horizons, to experience a way of life different to their own, to help others, and to do that in a way that ensures they do no harm? As a good global citizen, it is our collective responsibility to safeguard the range of interests engaged here. The young volunteers as they head abroad without a parent or guardian, often for the first time. The people in other countries who act as hosts. The professionals who accept responsibility for the young people in their care, many hundreds of miles from home. And the environment as we tackle back and forth our aeroplanes, travel back and forth in our aeroplanes, emitting harmful gases as we go. This is an issue on which we have already collaborated with colleagues in the Scottish Government's Health Directorates, with NHS Scotland and organisers such as the Alliance. The end result was a fantastic suite of online resources from NHSS staff on active global citizenship and doing it well. I would encourage you to read those, please. The McConnell International Foundation are working in partnership with the Scottish Government to deliver today's conference. We're very grateful to him for that. The Foundation has particularly relevant experience in this field. Its Livingston Volunteer Scheme was launched in 2014 to help support the fundraising efforts of those young Scots who have the chance to volunteer in Africa but are struggling to meet the costs. Together, we have brought together a range of speakers who also have a depth and breadth of experience in this area. And that's the most important aspect of today, is those people who have that experience. I hope that we can stimulate some valuable discussions that help us to understand each other's experiences, perspectives, and any lessons that we have learned along the way. All of that is incredibly valuable. These discussions will ultimately help us to produce a set of recommendations as a legacy seminar in early 2024, which will feed into developing guidance, setting up our best practice to ensure that whoever you are and wherever you travel to, everyone involved has the best chance of a positive experience. This type of guidance on youth volunteerism will complement and add to the online resources on volunteering and active global citizenship that I referred to earlier in my remarks, co-produced by and for NHS staff in Scotland. Being a good global citizen is central to so much of the Scottish Government's work, both at home and internationally. That is why, as a government, we are committed to partner country-led and inclusive development, to equality, to amplifying global South voices, to inclusion and diversity, and designing programmes that are innovative, adapting and sustainable, all set out in the new international development principles that we have co-created during our review process. And it is why these key principles are some of the subjects that we hope to cover today when thinking about how we best support volunteerism in a post-pandemic world. Those principles also now underpin all of our international development work. Just touching briefly on our new programming following our review of our approach in international development. 2024 will also see the launch of our new international development programme. Designed in consultation with our partner country governments, we have agreed to collaborate on 4 key thematic priorities. These include a key focus on health by working collaboratively to develop new programmes that build stronger health systems to tackle the world's leading cause of death and disability, non-communicable diseases, and support for health systems through investing in partnerships with NHS Scotland staff. Providing support for inclusive education, in particular advancing access to education for girls and learners with additional support needs. Renewable energy support with a knowledge exchange via our new Renewable Energy Centre hosted by Strathclyde University, and advancing the rights of women and girls through our new Women and Girls Fund and wider equalities programme. Of particular interest to delegates here today is that our new partnership strand within the International Development Team will focus on building and strengthening civic society and grassroots linkages with all of our partner countries. This includes through supporting our networking organisations who continue to receive core funding from the International Development Fund to promote the importance of global solidarity across Scotland. And I've had the great honour to meet many of them over the last few months and speak about our aims and aspirations as we move forward. Finally, the Scottish Government remains committed to supporting global citizenship in Scotland. Education and awareness are key drivers of ambition. We must educate our citizens, and particularly our youth, about the importance of the SDGs and how they relate to our everyday lives. And after today, my hope is that we better understand how volunteerism helps to foster a sense of ownership and solidarity amongst our people, and how we can then harness that deeper understanding to mobilise in a collective effort towards achieving those SDGs that we all hold so dear. So thank you so much, and I wish you well for a wonderful conference today and lots of good interest and information and action points for all of us to take forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Minister. Some big themes to talk about there. And I think in terms of one of them, the impact of COVID, which you touched upon, we've got a question from someone, a delegate today from Ruth Malua, who is Regional Coordinator of the Malawi-Scotland Partnership. Ruth, if you want to unmute yourself, we'll try to pin you and bring you on to ask your question. Are you there, Ruth?
Yes, I hope I'm clear enough.
That's great. We can hear you and see you, Ruth. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you want to go ask the Minister your question, thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, it's a privilege for me today to ask on behalf of Malawi-Scotland Partnership. So understanding that COVID-19 had a great impact on school partnerships, I would like to know from the Scottish Government perspective on what can be done to revitalize school partnership, as well as what would be the impact on school visits, as well as good governance that would have a positive impact towards everyone else on both ends, both Malawi and Scotland. Thank you.
Can I please come in before the Minister comes in?
If that's okay with the Minister, yes, please do.
Oh no, Minister, apologies. I think in my brief 5-minute talk, I forgot to link in the issue of volunteering or global citizenship to tourism. And I think Ruth just triggered something in my mind regarding this. And I think my request would be that based on the relationship that Scotland has with Malawi, from now on, when you're talking about school partnerships or volunteering or whatever, we need to understand or link it to the issues of tourism, where when people are coming to Malawi, they're also coming to do cultural exchange, and it's embedded within. But I want it now to come in a little bit handy. In your face, for example, when you're coming to Malawi, you're going to experience the culture, you're going to experience the people, the smiling Malawi, the resilient Malawians, and all of that. Once you do that, then it becomes a little bit easy for you to get in the shoes of your counterparts when you're coming to visit. And so we are coming from the COVID-19 pandemic, where we had 76% of job losses within the tourism sector. Now we're just picking it up. But it's just not about people coming to Malawi. People need to come to Malawi and then spend their money, of course, and then tell other people that are also going to come to Malawi and all of that. By doing that, Malawi is not coming to the world or to Scotland with a begging bow. It is saying, build us by what we already have. So I think that as Ruth was speaking, that's something that came to my mind. So I'm not trying to answer your question. You're going to go ahead and answer that. Honourable Minister, I thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, Minister, I just wonder if you want to respond on the points there made by Vera, Kamtukule, and the initial question from Ruth.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, David, and thank you, Vera, for coming in. I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's the cultural experiences that brings us back to for further visits and everything that goes along with that. But, as you say, if we can link those experiences, cultural or tourist experiences, to encouraging people to take Malawi out to the world, in a sense, as much as them coming in to visit, and bringing, obviously, their spending power to that, and as you say, spend their money and build up your economy. Your experience of the pandemic, as far as job losses goes, is not unfamiliar. I think that's a similar situation across the board. We are seeing that returning to an almost normal level now, but it has taken these next few years to do that. We can think about moving on in the future about how we raise the profile of Malawi to encourage people to come back there and to rebuild your tourist industry as we move along. And as you say, that creates a really vibrant economy for Malawi, and it means you're not coming with, in your words, that begging bowl. And we would wish to see you being built back better in that way, in which you become self-sufficient, but Malawi becomes a destination for people to come and spend their cash, really. So yes, I would agree with you on that, Honourable Vera. On Ruth's question, Ruth, yes, we did realise that many of our school partnership programmes did not survive the pandemic, and what we have done along the way is looking at the Malawi-Scotland partnership and Scotland-Malawi partnership. We've done a scoping assessment recently to see how many school partnerships are still live, and to test what their partnerships look like, because there'll be lessons in that, because if they are still going, what was the magic ingredient that kept them going, that we can use to sustain and maintain other ones going forward, but to bring back to life those partnerships as we move forward. So it's really important that the partnerships are live, they're vibrant, they're safe, they're mutually beneficial, which I think is a key message from both Honourable Vera, and no doubt many of the other speakers today, about that being a mutually beneficial relationship. So we're looking at some of the governance issues around this, how we can improve it, and we'd also have a study on school partnerships with Dr. Emma Arps. So that's why I was so keen for you to hear her work today. I'm hoping you'll listen to that. One of the key recommendations from that was to make school partnerships and visits a positive, holistic, to have a positive, holistic impact. And the first recommendation being not to take partnerships as a starting point, but as global learning. So maybe having the opportunity to review what we do, whether it's mutually beneficial, whether it gives both the participants and the deliverers of those partnerships a mutually beneficial arrangement. So that's why I'm keen to hear from Dr. Emma Arps today, and I'm sure you are too, and how we build those interconnected school partnerships back to be live and vibrant and holistic and mutually beneficial. So we're on it, is really the short answer for that long explanation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And another thing that we've touched on quite a lot already today is this whole idea of fair and equitable and accessibility as well. As you say, not all the partnerships have survived the pandemic. How do we go forward and ensure that volunteering overseas isn't the preserve of a certain section of society? How do we ensure that Lord McConnell earlier on said about potentially, financial support, but what about those opportunities as well to show global citizenship at home on that broader canvas?
Yeah, I agree with your first point, David, about sometimes it can feel as if it's only young people from well-off backgrounds that can access these opportunities, participate. And many young people maybe don't get the opportunity to both contribute and experience without travelling overseas. You'll have heard from Lord McConnell and the Foundation work that they're doing about creating a situation where they would support young people from maybe well-off backgrounds to take part in that and to organise that as well. But I think one of the key messages is, if the pandemic's taught us anything, we don't need to go overseas to be a good internationalist. And I think, or a good global citizen, but equally you can do some of this from home, considering maybe your own actions and lifestyle and how that impacts globally. So that's, talking about ethical buying, climate change, the impact of our behaviour in the north and the impact that then has on the south in that context. I think people could maybe consider becoming part of the Fair Trade Forum. I'm sure the Scottish Fair Trade Forum would join that, or join your local fair trade group. I've got an incredible one in Hamilton, one of the first fair trade towns in my constituency, and great people there. We had a smashing celebration of 10 years of the Scotland being a fair trade nation just a few months ago in this Parliament. It was great to bring everybody together. Consider joining climate action groups. There's many of them out there. Learn and educate. How do we influence people for positive change? My youngest son, when he got involved in his local climate group, put stickers on every light switch in the house saying "switch me off," and they're still there. So that was just a small measure to show us how to do things in our own homes that lessen the impact of climate change on others. And think about partnering with a school in the Global South, because in doing so, you give that opportunity. There's guidance, there's support, and there's best practice, but you give that opportunity for those voices to actually be heard. And that's why we value our Global South panel and the work that they are doing. And really, what are we talking about today? Consider some volunteering. There's many, many organisations who would love to have your time, your support, your energy, support refugees and asylum seekers, fundraising, supporting global initiatives. There's so much out there that from your own backyard, your front room and your school and your local community that you can support. So it's not all about going overseas, but we do have measures in place, and Lord McConnell's Foundation is obviously looking at how we create those opportunities for kids from less well-off backgrounds to take up those opportunities too. So there's a lot there.
Okay, thanks, Minister. And just to pick up on one point you made earlier about do no harm, what does that? You talked about those principles: accountable, transparent, safe as well. Just that question that interests me is, in totally understand the principle of do no harm. Is there an argument that we should make sure that while doing that, we're also not losing sight of the very positive benefits that good quality volunteering, good mutually beneficial volunteering has delivered in the past?
Yeah, no, absolutely, David. And I think if you look at the work that we are doing around about a feminist approach to foreign policy, we're just about at the finishing line for developing that piece of work and then taking it out to the world. And that tells us something about how we ensure that the impact that we have is a positive one. and is not a negative impact either through our travel or safeguarding issues as you mentioned, whether we are exercising an unequal balance of power, and that's why a huge part of our international development work now is about equalising that power, giving that power back, proper collaboration, proper participation. It's not about we think we know what you need. It's more, you tell us what you need and we will see how far we can come together in order to remedy that. And I think that participation part of it is absolutely key, and ensuring that those voices, the important voices, the people who are impacted, are heard. And that goes for the whole of the global north and our impact on the global south. And I think, ensuring that that balance of power in which wealth and privilege could be an intrinsic part is equalised and given back to the people who need it. And I think when we've got children, both children and adults travelling together who are not related, we obviously had to look into ensuring that those young people and all people are safeguarded. And that's where that do no harm sort of encapsulates all of what I've just said. It's about ensuring that you don't have an impact that's unintended, and that unintended impact is a negative one. And I think, participation and collaboration is the key to all of that.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Minister. I think we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, but thank you so much for your time and your contributions to setting the scene today. Some very big themes emerging already around fairness and accessibility, mutual benefit and respect, and again back to that point on attitudes and perceptions. So there's a lot to pick up on through the day. Thanks very much indeed to Christina McKelvie for her contribution. Before our comfort break this morning, we have two more significant voices to feed into the discussion. Again, I'd like to see some questions coming into the box. Lots of people are introducing themselves, lots of helpful links, but please post some questions and comments as well on what you're hearing from our speakers. So next up to speak, I'd like to welcome Francis Guy, who is CEO of the International Development Alliance. Francis has also worked for the UN Development Programme, for Christian Aid, for UN Women, and for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, with a career principally in the Horn of Africa and the Arabic-speaking world, including Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen. And Francis is going to talk about who benefits, international volunteering and development principles, today's challenges. Welcome, and over to you, Francis.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone who's spoken before. In fact, I'm going to take up some of the themes I think that Jack, the Honourable Vera, and the Minister have raised, especially on that piece about mutual respect and participation. I'm going to try and pose the question of who benefits, because I think it's a useful way to help us consider the place of overseas volunteering as a contribution to global sustainable development as a broader theme. There's obviously been much debate over the last 20 years and more about what is the role and what is the benefit of international development assistance at all, recognizing that it came out of a system, out of a place at the end of the Second World War, which is built on a system that had power structures that were part of a fading colonial era and which still has some inherent aspects of colonialism in it. As an organization, Scotland's International Development Alliance, we're seeking to explore what a truly decolonial, anti-racist, feminist approach to sustainable development would really look like. And the question that poses is really, who decides where money should go? Who decides and who participates in those decisions? And how does that participation influence the outcomes? And through that kind of lens, I wanted to look at some volunteering. Just to be clear also with what the Minister just said there, that volunteering generally is really very positive. But I think there are some basic principles which are often applied domestically in Scotland and which we could seek to apply internationally as well. I had a wee slide if someone's able to put that up with these principles. I don't know if you can see it, but basically they are that the volunteering should benefit the community and the volunteer, that it's not a substitute for paid work, that it doesn't threaten the job security of existing workers, that it respects the rights, dignity and culture of others, and it promotes human rights and equality, and that it's performed in the not-for-profit sector. And I'm interested that that's a theme that comes through when we're talking about domestic volunteering, and yet, you know, we've already mentioned that some of the volunteering organised for Scottish people going overseas is run on a for-profit basis. So that's fine, you can take them down, thank you. So to kind of look at how to apply that maybe in an overseas context, does the community request the help from the volunteer? You know, where does the start of the process begin? How engaged is a community in any project development? And by that, I don't mean just working in the project itself. I mean, in the conception and design at the beginning of the process. And who measures whether the community has benefited or not? These principles apply to development as a whole. I would just hasten to add, they're not just about volunteering, but I think because they apply to development as a whole, we should also be looking to apply them to volunteering. Academics have begun to look at this question of who benefits from overseas volunteering, and I think it's fair to say that you can separate it out into two, or they have separated it out into two different types. One is seeking to make a difference between what they describe as short-term volunteering, so something between 1 and 8 weeks, and longer-term volunteering between 3 months and 3 years. And unsurprisingly, more flexible, longer-term volunteering would seem to have more benefits. Other academics have differentiated between volunteering that's part of a wider program of supported by a government or by an NGO, and volunteering that has been encouraged by more profit basis, as we have already heard about voluntourism, which is largely aimed at young people doing gap years or for shorter periods. From a development perspective, voluntourism sounds like a very disparaging way to describe some of this, but I would like to be clear, it's not all negative. And there's a lot of good, as we've been discussing, in any kind of volunteering. But it's still worth us asking those basic questions. Do both the community and the volunteer benefit? Is it undermining someone else's work? And is it based on mutual respect? And with that lens, I'd like to look at a couple of examples, if I may. I was going to look at Peace Corps, because we're going to hear from VSO in a minute. Now, Peace Corps is not unlike VSO, although you may question that. Well-established, US-based operation, targeted basically at young graduates, looking to do more than a year, largely, in communities all around the world. If you look at the website, unsurprisingly, it's very targeted at the young people themselves, very focused on what good you can do, what experiences you can get, how you will become a better US citizen as a consequence of all of this. You can see where I'm getting at. It takes a bit of delving to realize that as part of their process, they have a system that's built in that after 3 months, the volunteer in a community should be undertaking a participatory community analysis to determine their kind of program. So, okay, that's positive. Peace Corps did an evaluation of their small grants project assistance program that this forms part of. It's a little bit dated, pre-pandemic. It looked at sustainability and impact, and it came out with lots of positive results, and most of 70% of the projects were very positive, and they were sustainable and everybody was happy. They didn't claim, they claimed that there wasn't much difference in sustainability between projects that had been devised by communities and projects that had been devised by the volunteers. I query that slightly because their definition of sustainability would seem to suggest that the projects they found that were most sustainable were those that had ongoing either government or NGO support. One can argue whether that's sustainable or not. It's sustainable in the sense that they managed to find other people to support the projects, but it's clearly not self-sustaining as a project. Anyway, it's clear that there's a lot of positives come out of such a process. And they made some clear recommendations to improve future sustainability, and we'll hear from Anne in a minute about how VSO deal with this. I wanted to also mention UN volunteers, which I know Stella in the chat said that she had been a UN volunteer, so it'd be nice to hear from her about her experience. But basically, this is something that's grown quite rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years. As David mentioned, I worked with UN Development Programme in Jordan as part of the regional office for the Middle East and North Africa. And a big chunk of our office was organising the UN volunteers for across that region. And UN volunteers are differentiated into different types. So they have experts who have more than 15 years of experience, specialists who have about 3 years of experience, youth and community volunteers who are often from the country themselves of where the programs are being implemented. And then they have also online volunteers who are often young professionals starting out, or not always, but what I saw was young professionals. And I wanted to mention my experience with online volunteers because we use them quite a lot as a way to do editing of reports and, in our case in particular, translation. So thanks to an Egyptian translator who was an online volunteer, as a program, we managed to help share a program that had been developed in Rwanda with women in Lebanon and Iraq. I have to say, it felt a little bit exploitative. This translator had a full-time job. He was doing this big translation in his extra hours. Without him, we would not have been able to do the program. Women in Lebanon and Iraq would not have benefited from the experience in Rwanda. And the Rwandans actually also gained from having the program tweaked and understood in a different cultural context. Did the translator benefit? I don't know. He got a certificate from the UN. He was able to put on his CV that he'd worked for the UN. I hope that it helped him get some other work. But we didn't pay him at all. As I say, we wouldn't have been able to do the project without that, but it does feel that it doesn't quite fit what I mentioned before about displacing paid work. So I leave that as a thought out there. My last example, and I don't want to name them particularly because I think there are many organizations that fall into this category, but was something I found when I was in Jordan, International Volunteering HQ, which offers 1 to 8 week placements for young people all around the world. There was an example in Jordan where they were offering exactly that, something between 1 to 8 weeks for mostly women to work in a women's empowerment project in Jordan. It's promoted as staying in a family, helping disadvantaged women. I mean, just from the way it's presented, as a former gender advisor in the region, I have a lot of problems with how it's presented. These women are disadvantaged only in the sense that they haven't had access to the same advantages as others, if you see what I mean. I would really query whether somebody from a different cultural context can make any difference in a week and is actually in danger of doing a lot more harm than good. And I would also suggest that local NGOs could do a lot better job in that context. Again, I'm not trying to say that all volunteering is bad. I'm saying that we need to ask ourselves some of these critical questions before we start. And just one final thought. We've talked already a bit about school partnerships, and I know we're going to talk about it further later. I just want to throw out the idea of talking about school exchanges. rather than partnerships. It feels to me a bit more equitable, and it has inherently that idea of a real bilateral exchange. It can be virtual, it can be in person, but it doesn't rule out the idea of in person. And across Europe, people have really benefited from school exchanges. Could we look at doing this more globally? Thank you. That's enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Frances. Some great points there, in addition to what we've heard already, particularly around who starts the process and who decides, who's kind of in control of starting that process. Very interesting. How do we evaluate? Have we improved at evaluating volunteering programs? And also that very key point about asking those critical questions. So lots to discuss in the Q&A afterwards. So Frances will be back probably in about 15 minutes or so to join the question and answer session. As you may have seen from the box, the next speaker is different to originally advertised. Originally, we were going to have Hataya Wongseng Paiboon speaking in this slot, but unfortunately she is unwell. We wish Hataya a speedy recovery, but we're extremely grateful to Anne Kahuria, who is VSO's Global Youth Engagement Officer, who's based in Nairobi, Kenya, for stepping in. And Anne's got more than a decade of experience in designing, managing, capacity building and supporting youth volunteering programs at a country, at a regional and at a global level. And she's going to talk about what works and how can international volunteering make a sustainable impact. So welcome to you, Anne Kahuria.
Yeah, thank you very much for this invitation to speak today. On behalf of my colleague Hataya, who's unwell, as shared. It's actually such an honor to be part of this important conversation around how we can make international volunteering have an impactful, sustainable impact. Actually, I just came back from Malaysia from the IVCO, that's the International Volunteer Cooperation Organization conference, where this was also a critical conversation around how can we make volunteering impactful, and more so around how can we put young people at the heart of volunteering and thinking about the new generation of volunteers as change makers. So as mentioned, I have been working in volunteering sector for more than 10 years. And my first actually encounter with international volunteers was when I was studying, where I did observe international volunteers supporting in terms of access to education, supporting teachers with learning methodologies and even curriculum development. And that was actually my first instance in terms of being able to encounter international volunteerism. And to address this question around how can we make international volunteerism sustainable, I will share my own personal experience as well as learning and best practices from VSO that we've had over time from our research as well as our implementation journey around international volunteerism. And for those of us who are not familiar with VSO, it's an international development organization that works across 30 countries in Africa and Asia Pacific. And in the last 60 years, we've worked with about 80,000 volunteers and we have supported about 50 million people across those countries. And these are mainly the most marginalized populations. Over time, VSO has evolved. Initially, it was more of a volunteer sending organization from the 1960s. And now it's a global development organization that works through community, national volunteers, as well as international volunteers to create lasting change in the communities. And we focus on 3 sectors, that is health, education, and livelihoods. Interestingly, over 70% of the target population that we work with in the community are young people. And also, interestingly, again, is 70% of the volunteers that we've been working with across those many years are also young people. And I think this speaks to the huge bulge of young people globally, and in terms of how can we harness on their energies, the population, as well as the innovativeness as volunteers. We've had some shifts in terms of volunteerism, actually, basically based on the pandemic that was there, the COVID pandemic, where there was a shift to looking at more of the remote volunteerism, and also the whole element of localizing volunteerism, which I'll be sharing a bit more as I share our experience. And as a start, I would also agree with Frances in terms of the critical questions that have been asked around how can we make volunteering mutually beneficial. I think that's a critical question that we need to be asking ourselves today, and I think it has been asked already, yeah. But again, for us in VSO, it's also critical to think through what problem or challenge are we trying to address through volunteerism at the community level. Do we understand the problem at the community level, what the communities want? And for us, it's really critical to be able to generate that evidence, have consultations with the communities and as well as partners to understand where are they at and what are the challenges they're facing and how can volunteers come to address the gaps. And more importantly is the element of ensuring that there's engagement of community volunteers as well. When you think about localizing volunteers, yeah, and seeing then what value can the international volunteers bring on board? What additional value can international volunteers bring on board? And this could be, whether it's in education sector, it could be also in health services or even in terms of humanitarian crisis. I think we need to ask those critical questions around what value addition are volunteers making. And another critical thing to also just be clear on is volunteering should never be about imposing another way of doing things at the community or another culture. It's about reciprocal sharing of ideas. I think that element of mutual benefit, there's that element of sharing of ideas and expertise between community, national and international volunteers. How do we ensure that for all of them, they actually value the experience of volunteering together? When we talk about blended volunteerism, what's the benefit of community volunteers when you have national volunteers and also international volunteers? At the same time, also recognizing that even the international volunteers as well, they also have a learning aspiration. What are they going to be learning from this voluntary experience, and how do we ensure that all of them feel that it's actually mutually beneficial? For volunteering, for international volunteering to be sustainable, it's critical to ensure that, one, we take account of the power dynamics, the difference in power dynamics between the global south and the global north, and also be able to demystify those power dynamics. I think that's really critical to look into. And one of the ways that we've been able to see this in VSO is really ensuring that there's strong community ownership in whatever is being done. As we bring international volunteers, let's also have the foundation of strong community ownership, even for that sustainability beyond the international volunteerism placements. I will share an example from one of the programs that we've implemented in VSO, actually one of the largest youth volunteering international volunteering program in VSO that was implemented in Asia and Africa region, referred to as International Citizen Service, which VSO led, the UK government implementing it from 2011 to 2020, where we enable young people between the ages of 18 to 25 from UK and from different countries to volunteer in development. And this program involved, or probably we were able to engage 20,000 young people from the UK, as well as 20,000 young people from developing countries. And one thing to note on this program is that the young people were living in host families and working as part of a team in the communities. And maybe I'll also just share my personal experience, because I managed the ICS program in Kenya then between 2013 and around 2015, where we had about 500 young people participate in the program every year. So the ICS program is a short-term volunteering program that would bring young people from the UK and from Kenya as well. I mean, in this case in Kenya, from Kenya to volunteer for 3 months in communities, yeah. And so we had 3 cycles in every year. So a cycle would probably have about 200 young people, 150 to 200 young people. So we had 3 cycles in a year. So the program, when we did the actual analysis and research to just find out the benefit to the community, the benefit to the volunteers, yeah, I would want to just mention, which is really something that is really a success, that 97% of the returned volunteers say that the volunteering placement was able to build their personal and professional development. And at the same time, also the communities were able to see that they were able to benefit from the volunteers' engagement. 92% of the project actually partners were able to state that they were able to benefit from the volunteers themselves. And what are the key success factors from this international volunteering program? One is the fact that we were able to design these placements based on the consultation with local partners and community to identify the needs and expected outcomes. This is really working with the local communities. As I said, just trying to localize volunteerism and seeing what are the local needs at the community level and how can we build onto that. The other key thing to the success of this program is the recruitment and matching of youth based on their interests. So the recruitment of the UK volunteers was also based on their interest, their passion, their career aspiration. The same thing also with the Kenyan young people and the other country young people, based on their career aspiration and personal growth. And it's really neat to note that for us, the volunteering was really a journey, taking into account that the volunteering is a journey for the volunteers to understand development, but at the same time also to grow into their careers. So how do we support them to address community needs at the same time building their individual volunteer growth or journey? The other key thing that was a success factor for us is really ensuring that we're able to train and prepare them adequately, both the local volunteers and the international volunteers, having pre-placement trainings given to both national and international volunteers to ensure that they're well prepared, and we're able to also manage their expectations and address any emerging questions before they actually come back into the community. Have some pre-reading for them to just understand where the communities are going to be going into is critical for them as well. And then for the placement partners and the host families as well, we also did have trainings for them to ensure they also understand the expectation and also be able to run through what is also some of the challenges they could have faced by having volunteers in their placement of family homes. So again, that's really critical in terms of preparation. But an important thing to mention also is the whole cycle looks at immersion of international volunteers into the community and facilitation of cultural understanding through host home stays and pairing with local and national volunteers. Again, that's a whole element of mutual learning, mutual benefit. They're all learning through the process, but also benefiting the community and also benefiting themselves too. And lastly, as a success factor is ensuring that there's dedicated leadership, support and management of volunteers. This is including focus on, as I said, on their volunteer journey and the blended volunteering approach, where we have, as I said, local volunteers, national volunteers, international volunteers, how to ensure that all of them are benefiting in the process and they're able to maximize on their time at the country level. So a case example in terms of really some of the projects that we're able to implement, and I'll also share again from Kenya, especially on the issue of stigmatization and exclusion of youth and young people with disabilities. I know there's a mention about how do we ensure there's equity, especially when you think about inclusion or probably ordinarily young people who would not necessarily benefit from the program. So for us, we had a pilot that was undertaken and was really a successful pilot where we had international volunteers from the UK and Kenyans who are deaf volunteers who volunteered in the community. And the big issue here is really the stigma around young people and children with disabilities. And for them, they were able to teach sign language to the community members, the host homes. And again, they were able to create safe spaces for deaf young people and children to advocate together in the local community and to ensure that service providers such as hospitals, government were able to be trained on sign language, just an element of inclusion. Maybe I can cite another example from Asia Pacific, that is in Bangladesh, where volunteers work to the local community to set up child marriage prevention committees. One of the bigger challenges there was really the element of early child marriages for girls, and how do they ensure that they were able to advocate for that? They were able to set up early child marriage prevention committees, stopping many girls from being married of an early age, actually working with the government and local community as well. Maybe just to cite some examples of that. I would also want to cite as part of maybe to back maybe some of the evidence that I've shared with you from the programming, we also did a research, which I'm going to be sharing with you the outcomes. With the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex, we worked with them to look at specific ways in which volunteers make contribution to international development. And some of the findings that we got from the research is that, one, there's a special role that volunteers as outsiders play. They can bring in new ideas, which spark innovation as evidence in emerging issues such as climate change, that is really an emerging issue, or even COVID pandemic, yeah? Volunteers inspire change, not just by what they do, but in how they do. They do it through building trust and social capital, yeah? So the whole element of the relation that they are going to build, but also the trust and social capital. And this really strengthens the local ownership of the work, meaning that they're able to make lasting change after volunteers even leave. And then the other key thing is that from the finding is that volunteers can help to challenge some deep-rooted cultural practices and attitudes, yeah? For example, on gender equality or attitudes on disability, or even the example that I shared from Kenya around inclusion of like the deaf young people and children, or the Bangladesh one around the early child marriage, which is really a big issue in some of the countries. The other key thing that we found from the research is that volunteers also help to get to places where others cannot necessarily get. They extend and improve the reach of public services. For example, international volunteers teach teachers. We've had teachers in some of the work, like Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, or even Bidibidi refugee camp in Uganda, supporting in teaching of the children in the refugee camps, yeah? So reaching out to them and enabling access to education. And finally, from the research, it was found that volunteering is usually the first step that people take to becoming actively involved in their communities. And I think this is something that is not necessarily a surprise to many of us, but it's just something to acknowledge that really it's really a first step to take to being actively engaged, and something we really need to promote, especially along the journey of social action and active citizenship. The other thing I'd really just want to mention, which I know it's going to be part of our conversation later, is really around how to ensure elements of having standards around volunteering, because it's really critical, especially if you're going to make international volunteerism sustainable. Yeah, we also need to ensure that we have volunteering standards that we're able to work alongside or are guided by those standards. Yeah, and as VSO, we're actually very proud to have led the development of the global volunteering standards, which is really a tool to help organizations and governments around the world ensure that people can volunteer responsibly. It was actually developed in collaboration with over 150 civil society organizations, and it's actually under implementation. It can actually be accessible. We're going to be sharing it on the chat. And the Global Volunteering Standard is a framework that supports actually volunteering involving organizations to better understand good practice and to become more responsible and impactful. So elements of do no harm, elements of safeguarding, elements of how do we manage volunteers, how do we recruit volunteers, those are critical elements that have been covered on the volunteering standards. And that's something that we can actually take on board as we look into the work we are doing. And I think for me, critical as I end this conversation, it's really critical to ensure that we have robust safeguarding mechanisms in place to ensure that communities are well protected. I think the whole element of mutual beneficial, being mutually beneficial, and also the safeguarding element, doing no harm, we need to have a clear and robust safeguarding mechanisms. And as I say, the global standards actually do articulate and help in terms of guiding that. As I come to an end and my conclusion, volunteering has a unique and powerful role to play in international volunteerism and delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. I look forward to discussing with all of you about this and more on what we can do to collaborate and also learn from the others as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne. Some fantastic thoughts there from Anne and from Francis. Lots to talk about. We've got just over 15 minutes. I'll come to some of the questions in the box in a moment. But first of all, to both Anne and to Francis, we come back a lot to this point on mutual benefit. And I just wonder, as you reflect, Anne, on your career of 10 years or so, Francis for a bit longer, how has volunteering grappled with that issue of mutual benefit, and what improvements have you seen in that understanding of the need for mutual benefit, and where do those gaps remain? I was interested when you said, Francis, that that a lot of volunteering came out of the Second World War and there was still some colonial aspects to it, and I just wonder why they're still there so so far into the future. But how are we doing in terms of getting better at understanding that mutual benefit? Francis, then Anne.
Oh, I think Anne's described some very positive developments that already happened. When I first came across VSO many years ago, It was about, you know, people from the UK going and teaching in remote places in Sudan with no, there was mutual benefit. I'm not suggesting that there wasn't in a way in that time, but there was no discussion with the local communities. And what she's described is a wonderful, much more participatory process. So I think already we're in a much different place. I would like to just re-comment a bit on the UN volunteers, because I think it's quite interesting in terms of encouraging a more global community, if you like, and they do some very interesting annual reports that are worth a look at. And the 2022 one was about volunteering from marginalized communities. So really trying to encourage that idea that volunteering is for everyone, and you can help your own community, but you can help other communities. And, you know, Anne's point about sharing on climate change knowledge, the best sharing on climate change knowledge I saw was between Peru and Yemen, you know, and that's not going to happen between Scotland and Malawi. You know, it's that kind of creating that global connectivity, which is clearly happening. It's beginning to happen. So, you know, if we can do a bit more of that. And in answer to somebody in the chat, yeah, both ways. I'm not quite sure how we do it, but I agree with that point, that it needs to be exchange in all directions. I'm sure Yemenis can help people in Peru on something else too, and people in Scotland, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. And just some general thoughts from you. You gave some very good examples there, as Frances said, Anne, just in terms of how you've seen that journey in terms of understanding the mutual benefit and actually acting upon it.
I think it's been a journey. And one of the key things here is really ensuring volunteers do understand development, yeah, from whatever perspective they're coming from, whether it's actually at national level, at local level, at international level, yeah. And I think for us, like with the ICS program, it was really critical for us to be able to ensure, as part of the pre-placement training, they understand that development is a journey, and their contribution may not necessarily be, they may not necessarily come and change everything, yeah, but they would actually come and be part of the contributors. But more so looking at it from an individual perspective, what do you really want to benefit from this journey? Is it something you just want to do for the sake of, as a hobby, or do you want just to do it because you want to learn through, gain career experience? And I think for us, what you've seen through the journey is that most of the young people, as part of that mutual benefit, most of the international volunteers and local volunteers who've gone through volunteerism, they're able to identify their career path through that journey of volunteerism. So it's benefit to them by the fact that as at individual level, some of them have been able to change their career paths based on the volunteering experience, being able to go and experience the outside world and seeing, actually, maybe I could actually be a good teacher, I could actually be a good community mobilizer, those kind of things, change their career, yeah? But at the same time, at the community level, being able to work with them and coming up with innovation and solutions together with the local community, it acts as a benefit for them as well in the community level. They actually see the value that they're being involved, and the young people or the volunteers also want to understand their culture as well. So they see there's value for them, even the locals, that they're bringing the cultural understanding as well. They're being valued by the fact that they're also bringing someone on board. So I think it's really good to trigger that kind of learning both ways, or even if it's a tripartite kind of volunteerism, just ensuring the partner, the volunteers, local volunteers, international volunteers also have a benefit, and it's very clear on that journey. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Frances, there's a very specific point. You made the point about whether short-term volunteering, you talked about a week, can be genuinely beneficial. There's a point from Callum Henderson from Comfort International saying we've been running school trips to Rwanda for the last 18 years and seen them really benefit both the young people and the visited communities partners, that they're not faultless, but they can be life transforming, enhancing and informing. I just wonder if you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, and there's been some other chat about Peace Corps examples that I used, in that they weren't seen as development programs. I think my problem with it was that they often sold to volunteers as that they're going to be doing good. Actually, maybe for those shorter term ones especially, we should just be more honest that it's about a cultural exchange, that it's about that mutual learning at a human level, rather than thinking that you're somehow going to go and transform the world. I'm not undermining the value of that wonderful experience for people who are hosting and for people who are traveling. But I just think we should maybe be a bit more honest in how we're talking about it. That we are doing good. We are doing good in that, because that cultural exchange and basic mutual understanding is doing good, but not in that kind of old-fashioned sense, if I could put it that way. So that it's really about that bothers me, not the actual activity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Anne, just a similar point made by Kate Allen, who used to work with the VSO British Council Youth Programme Global Exchange. And Kate's point is that she thinks that was much more dynamic than ICS. It was 6 months or 3 months in the UK. And, you know, young volunteers, for example, from Nepal come into the UK to volunteer. I just wonder, she's asking, has VSO learned from that programme?
Yes, I mean, there's been quite a learning because, of course, by us moving from the GX to even ICS, there's learning, but of course, there are also limitations in terms of maybe the funding itself. But I think for us, it's really critical just to understand that whichever placement you're taking, whether it's really an exchange between south to south or even north to south, it's really just critical to ensure that one, there's that critical understanding of the benefits, that would be from both ends, but at the same time also being clear on what we want to achieve at the end of the day. So yes, there are learnings, and I know initially it was really 6 months, and now we changed to 3 months. One was because of the availability of the young people being probably within the school setting, just being able to adapt for those 6 months or being able to be available for those 6 months of the challenge. But at the same time, also we do have the international volunteerism, because we had the youth volunteering and the international volunteering program as well. So they could actually extend if they wanted to probably move to the 6 months or 1 year. We had that option of moving to the international volunteerism. But at the same time, also it's looking at how can we also be able to offer as many chances to as many young people as well, not necessarily just having a few for longer period. Thank you.
Okay, and Anne, you made another very interesting point, I thought, about volunteers can bring in new ideas and change and innovation, and potentially social capital as well. How often do you think volunteering projects are designed, you know, from your experience in VSO and elsewhere, with that in mind, that they want to go in there and really do something innovative and different?
So I think I share some examples also, like from VSO in the recent past. And this is really following some of the emerging trends. Of course, development trends are actually changing. Think about the COVID pandemic that shifted almost everything to remote working, And for us, we were able to engage volunteers in terms of coming up with innovations around, for example, how can you tackle COVID response in your own local community, and the transfer of knowledge remotely between volunteers from different countries. And I think that was really a good example for us to cite around the COVID pandemic and being able to tackle that remotely. And the other thing is really around climate change. So it's really just being able to give that platform and room for innovation beyond just structured volunteering programs, but also opening that window for how can international or even just volunteers generally be innovative, being given a challenge that they're able to come up with solutions. I think we've seen that in VSO on areas around COVID pandemic, areas around climate change, advocacy, and even around sexual reproductive health and rights. I think there's room for that, and you've seen that being evidenced as well in VSO. I hope that answers your question, David.
Yeah, I wonder if you have anything to say on that, Francis, too. I think it does answer the question, Anne, but, you know, just from your experience, Francis, how often do volunteering projects, I mean, Anne has used some very good examples, but are they the rule or the exception? How many volunteering projects are looking at doing something genuinely innovative and really building social capital?
I don't think I can answer that, actually. But I also have a slight concern about the idea of people challenging some existing cultural norms in places. I understand what you're saying, and I think that opening horizons and challenging where some of these ideas come from is good, but I'm concerned that it could be. I've seen the backlash. I was a white woman doing gender issues in the Arab world. I mean, that is a highly problematic space, right? I'm very glad to say that my successor is an Arab woman. for exactly that reason, because it was very easy for people to say, yeah, but that's your agenda. Well, you know, you're talking about equality and gender equality. That's your space. It's not our space. And to reject it because I was saying it. So I'm just a little bit nervous that that would be also the same in the, I know you mentioned Bangladeshi young marriage, early marriage issues. I just feel that sometimes it makes it too easy for people to push back when it comes out from an external participant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to take another question from the box. Emmanuel Mandwama saying, in most developing countries, due to extreme poverty and high unemployment, volunteering is being considered a substitute for formal employment. And this has had impacts in terms of connecting overall benefit of volunteering programs to its sustainability, as most volunteers look at the end rather than the impact it will bring. So how can we address that? Anne, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. I do agree, and I think that has been a challenge in many countries, especially around the lack of employment and people opting for volunteering as part of a pathway, and being challenged to that. I think one of the ways to addressing that is really being able to work with the government around ensuring that there are policies that are able to tackle that. A good example, like in the case of Kenya here, I was involved in development of the national volunteerism policy. And one of the bigger conversations was really around how do you differentiate volunteerism and internship. And that had to be covered under the policy to ensure that there are clear guidelines in terms of what kind of support should be offered by volunteer-involving organizations, And in this case, like in the Kenya policy, volunteering cannot extend beyond 3 months, That means that you would have to extend, if there's any extension, there needs to be some discussion, or it needs to translate more to employment. So I think there's that element of a policy. I think the other key thing is really around education and awareness creation around what is volunteerism and differentiating that, because people interchangeably use volunteerism as internship. Having clear awareness and education around what is volunteerism, because we tend to have the risk of losing the volunteerism spirit by the fact that volunteerism is being misused. So I think just also the education element and awareness creation is really critical, and having the structure and framework that guides that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're coming towards the end. Francis and Anne, I don't know whether you heard me put this question to Christina McKelvie, but how do we get that balance right between the mantra of do no harm and actually making sure that we are taking the best and the most positive elements of a variety of international volunteering schemes that we've seen over the years? How do we make sure we're not focusing too much on what not to do and maybe losing what we can do in a positive sense? Francis?
Well, I think we've shown already in this discussion and in the discussion in the chat that there's so many potential examples and lessons to be learned from experience that actually there's a lot that you can build on in all of that. So I think it's going into it humbly and looking at all the experiences that are out there, and people who have that 10 years worth of experience or more, carrying on in the sector because they have learned on the way, as it were. I would fully endorse what Anne was saying about my point in the principles was about displacing work. I think we do have to be very, very careful about that. And it's great if the Kenyan government are thinking about how that works, because I've seen that as a real drawback. As an organisation ourselves, we don't take volunteers at the moment, in the sense that if we're talking about unpaid interns, there are only people who can afford to work to not being paid. It's back to Jack McConnell's original point about who participates in this. If it's only the people who can afford it, then it's not in the same spirit of volunteerism. So we need to keep that in our minds as well. Thank you.
Okay, and just I'm going to ask a specific question to end on. There's a good question from Lucy Colhoun about you talked, Francis and Anne, earlier on about sometimes those two-way relationships are not the ones we might imagine during the discussion we're having today relating to Scotland. You talked about Peru and Yemen. Are there many examples, do you know, Anne, of volunteers from the Global South coming to Scotland to share their expertise, or the UK more generally, maybe in terms of climate resilience, conservation, etc.? And can we do more of that?
Sorry, could you recap on your question, David?
Yeah, are there good examples in terms of climate resilience and conservation of volunteers coming from the global south to Scotland or to the wider global north, in in general terms, and really bringing and building capital in the global north because of their own personal experiences? And if there aren't too many examples, how can we encourage more of that?
I think because it's really an emerging issue, climate change, I think we're still at the point of learning and trying to look at what is really working. But what I've seen working is really the element of, for example, the awareness creation and the issues of campaigns around climate issues. For example, waste recycling, being able to create employment from waste, elements of green ecology or green farming. I've also seen elements of use of organic fertilizers coming up. So I think there are actual practices happening across the globe. But I think what has been happening more, what I've seen is more of the sharing happening online. But I think there could be more of the practices being shared even in person through the exchanges. But I think there's been limitation in terms of travel following COVID. But I think post-COVID now, I think that is actually opening up and there would be more of that happening. But I know there's actually opportunities for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. We have come to time. I do want to try and stick to time if we can, given that we've got a lot to get through after the break. There's a lot more things to discuss. I hope that some of the conversations that are ongoing with people making connections in the chat box will be taken forward afterwards, and I hope that we can also pick up some of the questions in the later discussions. But I'd just like to say a tremendous thanks to Francis Guy and to Anne Kahuria for their tremendous contributions today in getting some more big issues out for discussion. We're now going to have a short comfort break, so please make yourself comfortable, but we will restart at 11:40. So you've got just about under 10 minutes. We'll start again at 11:40. Thanks again to Anne and Francis for great contributions. See you in 9 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to today's event on volunteering and global citizenship. I hope you've enjoyed the event so far, and rest assured there is plenty more to come. We touched a little bit on these themes in the first half, but we're going to go into them in a bit more depth, and they are school partnerships and early career volunteering. We'll have a panel discussion on each of those, and we've got some more great speakers, and I hope you'll keep those comments and questions flooding into the chat box. Some really great contributions during the first half of the event. So now we're going to talk about the value of school partnerships and educational trips post-COVID and against the backdrop of the climate crisis. We'll hear 3 scene-setting contributions of about 5 minutes each, and then we'll move into a panel discussion. So first of all, I'm going to introduce a speaker who's been mentioned already today. Irma Arts is a postdoctoral researcher at Radboud University in Nijmegen in the Netherlands, and she was the author of the 2020 Scottish Government study on school partnerships and global citizenship. So Irma, welcome to you.
Thank you, David. I don't know what's happening with my camera, so I think you see me as a black screen. I'm really, really sorry. I haven't figured out what to do, but I'll just introduce, just use my 5 minutes and hopefully I'll work on the camera in the meantime. So I think what I just wanted to mention, so I worked as a researcher with the Scottish Government ID team to understand like the secondary school visit in the Scottish context a bit more. And this was pre-COVID study. And I think sort of what the research showed was that if there is an aim of like working on good global citizenship for these pupils, then there are aspects that a visit can support, but there's also options to kind of build intercultural exchanges without those visits. But we also saw that pre-COVID, so I'm actually not sure how it is now post-COVID, that most schools that did have a partnership with a global school in the Global South also planned visits. But these visits can obviously have impact on sort of, well, the climate question, on traveling just around the globe, but they can also sometimes be counterproductive to global learning. So they might unconsciously promote stereotypes of poverty or of other cultures. And I think the main thing that I want to kind of stress today is that for me, the basis should be that pupils are supported in thinking about and challenging like global problems in a critical way. And considering links to social justice, to questioning structures, questioning power, and a really strong way of doing that could be peer-to-peer conversations. But they might be during a visit, but they might be facilitated otherwise. And to make a visit, I would say worthwhile, is to embed it into a further learning program with like continued reflection on this critical thinking. And maybe lastly, I would say if a visit is organized, and I think maybe Emma Wood, our other speaker, will also stress this or mention this, is that it's really important to involve those, or to think about the mutuality and of the exchange, and involve the local voices and desires of the young people within the visiting country. So I think I'll leave it at that, and hopefully I'll get my camera to work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Irma. I don't know whether you want to just go out and then come back in and you know, the old refuge of the scoundrel to see if the camera works.
Yeah, I might do that. Thank you.
But if you'll note, Irma's study has been put into the chat box. I had a read of it yesterday. Very, very interesting. Very pragmatic in terms of looking at school partnerships, and we'll be able to pick up on some more of the points made by Irma just then and in the study in a bit more detail during the discussion later on. I'll now introduce Ian Mitchell, who has recently joined the Scotland-Malawi partnership team as Youth and Schools Officer. Ian was previously a physics teacher in Fife for more than 30 years and has been heavily involved in the school partnerships between Beath High School and schools in Malawi. He prefers to be called Mitch rather than Ian, so I will hand over to Mitch to give us his initial thoughts.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. The last 11 years of my teaching career was spent at Beath High School in Fife, which is in one of the less well-off areas in Fife. But the work within the Malawi group has involved the whole community. We've had 3 trips to Malawi in 2016, 2018 and 2019. The first 2 trips were with youngsters for the school. We did have a planned one in 2021, which COVID knocked on the head. And we do have another one planned for 2025. I think I want to get away from this idea of volunteerism right away. I don't see myself as a volunteer when I go out there anyway. We certainly are fully involved with the communities. One of our schools, the priest has quite a lot of involvement, and we always contact and communicate with him. We're now in contact with the community council and others in the area around our second school, and it's always been a partnership which has been based on what each can provide. We do work when we're out there. We do have a wee bit of holiday, shall we say, when we're out there. It seems sad to take young people that far and not do a wee bit of, shall we say, the holiday bit, the tourism bit. But for the bulk of the time we are there, we're actually in the schools, working with the young people in the schools, taking part in lessons. We've been involved in community partners as well in terms of choirs and singing. We've had music teachers going out in the past, and we would dearly have loved to have had teachers come back the other way. And we had a funding through British Council, which unfortunately was again kiboshed due to COVID. Why go there? Well, you can watch a rugby match on the television, but it's not the same as actually being there. And I think actually going and visiting these places actually breaks down stereotypes and sort of gets rid of some preconceptions. It's been one of the talking points we've always had with our group of youngsters at Malawi about Malawi is, what do you think? What do you think actually is Malawi? You know, what do you know about it and everything else? And you do come up with some pretty stereotypical answers, shall we say, but that changes quite dramatically when they've actually been there. They come back with a very different perspective on both their own lives and the lives of others. On our first trip, we actually had 2 of our youngsters came back and changed their courses they were applying to through university to do international law and international relations and justice for just on what they'd seen. We've had other ones follow medical degrees then, who you wouldn't have thought would have gone down that line. It just wasn't a part of them when they were actually at school. So I think this kind of thing really does have an impact on people. It certainly was life-changing for me. And I've brought Malawi into my lessons, certainly since I've been there in 2016. Just trying to highlight differences and very much the similarities. I've actually taught in Malawi, and going back to one of the things that the Honourable Vera said, and that was a challenge because I was so accustomed to just switching on a computer and maybe getting a wee link on YouTube or something else, and I had to go back to absolute first principles. And yeah, it was worth it. It was worth doing that, particularly in a subject I don't teach, which is biology. For that, so yeah, I think I'll probably call it quits there. Basically, I think the travelling idea, going on, we'll get back to climate change, to me, it would be a very short-term loss for a very long-term gain in what the youngsters actually get from it. Because I think in a lot of the cases, it's still the first thing, when I bump into any of them that have been on these trips in the past, it's still the first thing they ask about. It's what's happening with Malawi.
Okay, great stuff. Excellent contribution there, Mitch. Thank you very much indeed. And again, a lot of issues there to talk about, and including, you know, challenging the very term voluntourism. And again, this whole point about do no harm against the positive benefits of volunteering. So some things we can pick up on later. Finally, in this session, I'm going to introduce Emma Wood, who's a senior lecturer in communications at Queen Margaret University, which is just up the road from where I am here in Musselburgh. Emma is the lead on the Stecker Skills Youth Solidarity Project, and she's just going to explain why she's going to let some young people initially do the talking for her. Emma, just a few words from you to introduce your slot.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to say our project was mentioned earlier. It was the result of a £10,000 small grant, feasibility study grant from the Scottish Government, where we wanted to try and change the way these trips can happen. It was co-produced with some amazing young people who are still part of the team, all resident of a very amazing children's home in Malawi called Stecker. So all these young people are very much poverty experienced young people, and we worked together to try and disrupt the power dynamic, the culture of donor dependency, and do something different. And I'm now going to be quiet and they're going to speak for themselves.
Just to say, it will take a couple of seconds for the video to start. There's a black screen at the beginning and then it'll start after about 5 seconds. Here we go. Enjoy the film. It's great.
What was happening before was that they would just come in, maybe they'll pick up a baby, then they'll take a selfie, ignoring like young people like me of their age. So after like we started the dialogues, now it was a chance where we were able to voice our views on how critical we are about them just picking up babies and taking selfies.
Sometimes it happens that we have something to tell them, or maybe they have something to tell us, but we fail to.
What was happening before was that they would just come in, maybe they'll pick up a baby, then they'll take a selfie, ignoring like young people like me of their age. So after like we started the dialogues, now it was a chance where we were able to voice our views on how critical we are about them just picking up babies and taking selfies.
Sometimes it happens that we have something to tell them, or maybe they have something to tell us, but we fail to communicate just because maybe we are shy of them, or maybe they are shy of us.
Yeah, that's good. That's true.
It acted as a platform where us as young people from Malawi and the young Scots that we are visiting to take part in the dialogue, we all felt as equals without the other group, either us or them, feeling superior over the other. I think there's a huge difference between the people who just come in and the people who do take part in the dialogues. If they take part in the dialogues, they'll be able to know what we want and what we do not want them to do, as well as learn from each other.
What's also surprised me the most is how involved they've been in understanding the people at Stecker Stories, and how much just overnight their opinions have changed of what coming on expedition to Malawi actually means to them.
I learned the right and wrong ways to treat the work that we're doing, and just the difference this culture, especially because we were just coming in.
More than anything, I hope it's empowered them to think about the role in the world,
not in the sense of volunteerism, but as something far more as an agent for political change.
We learn a lot of things that we wouldn't have learned otherwise, but also it's pointed out to me what the kind of things that we haven't.
The type of policies that they have in their country are the ones that are able to be free and safe from different gender issues.
Me and us feel that we should be more active in our own problems and talking about issues on social media and with each other, and that we can do things to solve issues because people here are managing to do it and they've got bigger challenges than we do, so we should do our best to do the same.
Hello, can everybody please mute yourself? This is an absolutely excellent video, and we're just hearing background noise from people who haven't muted themselves. We'll continue playing the video when we can be certain that everyone has muted themselves, so please do that now, because it is spoiling everyone else's enjoyment of this excellent video. Thank you.
Just the differences in the cultures and how to respect this culture, especially because we're just coming in.
More than anything, I hope it's empowered them to think about the role they play in the world, not in the sense of volunteerism, but as something far more important as an agent for political change.
You learn a lot of things that you wouldn't have learned otherwise, but also it sort of pointed out to me what the kind of things that we have in Scotland that protect us against the problems that they have in Malawi.
The type of policies that they have in their countries are the ones that are enable them to be free and safe from different gender issues, or should I say gender inequalities.
I think made me and us feel that we should be more active in our own problems and talking about issues on social media and with each other, and that we can do things to solve issues because people here are managing to do it and they've got bigger challenges than we do, so we should do our best to do the same.
It surprised me quite a bit, and it also was like different to what you see on TV, like sort of stereotypes of the country, like they're a lot more self-sufficient than I thought they were, which was like eye-opening and like made me think differently about coming here now.
I think one thing that they have learned is that they have learned about how resilient young people here in Malawi are. They have been able to hear from first-hand information and gain an understanding on different things that they see, maybe that before they were just saying, but they did not understand. For example, how the poverty that is here in Malawi, they just knew that there was a lot of poverty here in Malawi, but they did not understand as to why things are like that.
It has far exceeded our expectations. We thought we'd be here for a couple of hours, we'd chat about issues affecting young people, and we would leave. We have spent a whole day here. We're exhausted. Our faces are sore from smiling. We've had so much to think about. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I would wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone.
We are feeling comfortable. Comfortable of how to speak to many people. Especially English is very difficult.
Thank you very much to Emma for that sharing that excellent film. Apologies for the gremlins there, and just for people who are asking, it's not possible to mute everybody. If we do want people to be contributing, we are relying on people to do their own muting. I'm sorry, the link to the video has already been shared in the box, and it will be shared with you as part of the sort of suite of documents after the event as well. Emma, just picking up with you first of all on that video, what that suggests that there was a real communication gap between Scottish young people going to Malawi and the young people there, which the dialogue sought to address. What do you see as the main positive impacts of that in both the short and the longer term?
I think the positive impact, there's been quite a few people here today talked about, you know, we have to address the power imbalance, and clearly that does have to be addressed. And I think that probably is the positive impact, that the young people at STECA managed to empower themselves enough to be able to absolutely lead these critical dialogue groups. And there were no adults involved in that, by the way. It was just young people speaking to young people, so nobody was having to perform. They were able to have their brave space and discuss what they really thought. And I think the power of that, I've been working on critical dialogue with young people since 2008, and it is very difficult for teenagers at that particular stage in life to feel brave enough to say what they really think about things. And I think learning how to do that dialogue has been incredibly influential. And if you look in the report that I think people have been given the link of, that both the Malawian and the young Scots talk about this as being absolutely life-changing. I'd just like to make one point, though, because I think sometimes I've sort of slightly taken an intake of breath as people have perhaps rather glibly said, we need to address the power imbalance. It took 18 months before any of those young Malawians would even contemplate having agency over white people that came to visit them. That actually, you know, where possibly people here are highly educated, we have lots of social capital and confidence. That's not true for people who have been oppressed. And it did take a long time, and it was using a very specific model of critical dialogue. So it's hugely rewarding to do, and it's still going on. I've just come back from Malawi where they've been running more of those, but it's not an easy process.
Okay, thank you. Mitch, I'm interested to bring you in here. Some of the language in that film was quite stark, picking up babies, taking selfies and so on. What you've described, your own experience is a bit different to that, I think you'd say. Do you know, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it was different to some extent. The first trip we had really no idea what we were going to. My previous head teacher, Douglas Young, had been out in Malawi, and he was the one that really brokered the partnerships. We had really no idea what we were going to, but the partnerships have evolved, and we've never seen anything like that. We go to the church services when we go there in both communities. We fully take part in that. The youngsters certainly want to get their photographs taken. I mean, by the time I was back in 2018, the word photobomb had appeared in their vocabulary. They were coming in, but there's never any forcing of this. In the trip in 2018, we had one youngster on the trip who was already involved in working with primary youngsters in sort of sports and activity groups and that, and she was an absolute godsend. I mean, she got them playing all manner of games and everything else, and got our group involved in it as well for it. So no, I really can't say it. I would have to say as well that we are building more towards what Emma's talking about now, I think, where we're really trying to get our youngsters to think more critically about what they can do both at home and for our friends in Malawi.
Okay, thank you. And Irma, it's great to see you. The video is now definitely working. What are your perspectives on that video, Irma? Your report mentions the potential negative impacts of promoting stereotypes of poverty, and that students coming from Scotland or elsewhere can help or change, in inverted commas, a community. How do you think dialogues like this and improved communication generally can help make volunteering have a more positive impact for everybody involved?
I mean, I think it's very powerful. What Emma would said, it's a very powerful tool because you give them the chance to really, really talk and really sort of discuss issues that are close to their own heart. And I also think it's often not like consciously that they that stereotypes are reinforced in a way. So even when the photo taking is not forced, it can still be framed in a way that they've used to be seeing, you know, how promotional material in the past have been done. So it's kind of also tackling this unconscious way of doing and way of framing, which is, I think, these dialogue sessions can be really powerful for, and can really go into like a deeper reflection, even, yeah, because sometimes we do things maybe, and it's within the debate of sort of decolonization in general, like we do not, you know, everyone would probably agree that we don't want to do any of this, but sometimes unconsciously you keep framing things in a similar way, that you have to be challenged by those young people themselves from Malawi or from anywhere else before you can sort of critically think about it.
Okay, thank you very much. We touched already on this whole idea of, and your report, does, that school partnerships don't start in a vacuum. They need to be part of this bigger approach to global learning and understanding big global issues. And I just wonder, Emma, where you think, from your observation, and then come to you, Mitch, as well, your observation of partnerships, do they start off by trying to get that broader global perspective on what is going on in that country where they may be considering a partnership? And I guess that comes back to Francis's point on who decides what are the right things to do here. So Emma, just about that broader global learning context and your observations on that.
So I guess if I was being controversial, I'd say that a lot of the partnerships that occur between Scotland and Malawi are between schools. And when you look at the percentage of young people who are actually lucky enough to be at secondary school in Malawi, you can see that that's an elite group. So we've got quite an elite group from Scotland meeting an elite group in Malawi, and how much then is being learnt there. There's a lot of negative stuff said about poverty, tourism, and things like that. And I think that's so offensive, as well, as you can see from those young people. And we've got a whole host of other films of the young Stecker residents showing how powerful and interesting they are as people. So I think a partnership, we need to be sure that everybody in a country does have access to this partnership. For example, I'll be really quick because I know we don't have much time. We ran these critical dialogue groups with schools in Malawi. So it was Malawian to Malawian. And it was really interesting in that the secondary school we ran it with had exactly the same misconceptions about poverty and young street kids and sexual initiation camps and all the stuff that happens to poverty experienced young people in Malawi. They had exactly the same misconceptions as the Scots had. So if we've only got Scots going to meet quite privileged Malawians, I'm not quite sure how useful that is and how much it will disrupt their views. And I do worry when I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, we were just the same. We went to Malawi and realized how much we have in common. Well, actually, there's a lot you don't have in common. You know, a lot of young people here think, for example, that gender inequality is a glass ceiling, whereas in Malawi, it's that you're sent off to a sexual initiation camp at the age of when you reach puberty so that you can become marriageable, etc., etc. So the starting point for our dialogues was all the young people at Stecker were asked, what do you want your visitors to know about your life? End of story. And then they came up with what they wanted them to know about.
Okay, Emma, you've mentioned in the chat there that Gift Thompson, who featured in that video, is on the call today. I mean, I just wonder whether Gift would be interested in coming in and just sharing his experiences a little bit. Gift, if you're there, if you're able to mute yourself, I just wonder if you could give us some comments on your experiences of meeting those visitors and your experiences of those dialogues. Are you there, Gift? Maybe not. But if you can hear
I
us,
am.
oh,
Can
great.
you hear me?
Hi, Gift.
Hi.
We've got you. Yeah. How are you? How are you
Hi.
doing?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. So
Yeah.
any comments on how you found the experience of the dialogues and creating that video?
I think like initially, it was like, I don't want to repeat some of the things that has already been described in the video, but initially it was quite like, quite a tough experience. But then at the same time, some of these things, I would say that like some of the issues that like we've talked about in the video were sort of like normalized. So even for us, it was very difficult to see the issue with what was happening before, where like maybe people would come in and pick the babies, or would come into the children's home and want to see where we sleep, of which now I would say confidently that was more, was an invasion of our privacy and things like that. So before it was sort of like, very, very difficult to sort of like, even from a Malawian perspective, being able to be critical of these issues. But then at the same time as well, like being at the children's home, in a way, we were more accepting of certain things happening that even if we weren't happy about, we wouldn't really say, because we would be like, oh, maybe, we'll come in, whatever that they want to do. If they want to take selfies, let's just smile and, pretend that like, we're all happy, and, so that maybe by the end of the day, maybe they leave something, oh, because we are hosting them, so we don't want to sort of like be these sort of like very rude visitors. So it was quite like, I would say that like, a black and white experience in a way that like, it was quite difficult in terms of like, how do you navigate these things? But then the coming of the dialogues, not only did it give us that power or that even that chance to be able to actually look at our own behaviors when they come, and in terms of like, what is it that they do when they visit us? Do we really like these things? Or what is it that we don't like about it? So from us as the children, as a family, we're sitting down and having that discussion in terms of like, what is it that maybe you want them to do when they come, or what is it that like maybe we need to make sure that they don't do. But then at the same time, it was also being able to have that chance to say, oh, what is it that like maybe we can learn? They are learning about some of the things that we've experienced, but also at the same time, we want to be open enough to be able to create that two-way process where we are learning from them. What are their experience like in Scotland or wherever they're coming from in terms of like the different issues that we're talking about. So just to wrap up, I don't want to take too long, but like the experience was really good in a sense that like it's given us this platform to say, have that chance to have that dialogue where I'm not gonna feel that like they're gonna judge me as maybe being this rude host, or they also feel judged in a sense that, oh, maybe if we say something, these people, they're gonna judge us in this way. So it was more like having that platform, we call it a brave space, where we were able to sort of like tackle some of these issues. And yeah, so in a way, in the end, it was quite like a really good experience. But also lastly, the other important thing was that like that power enough to be able to come and to have like that financial independence, because rather than maybe they'll come in with donation, they'll go to a shop, buy things that they think that we need, but maybe without consulting us. But in the end, they would be able to, rather than giving us donation, we're able to actually have a decent job where we're working as dialogue facilitators, we're getting paid, but then at the same time, some of that money is used to be able to address some of the financial issues and some of the things that we might need. So not only was it like from the power dynamic issue, but also it was important from a financial perspective that like it was really good in that sense.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gift. Just one more question briefly. One of the comments.
Sorry, can I come in very quickly just on a point Emma made? Actually, the bulk of our partnerships are between primary schools and secondary schools with primary schools, not secondary. It's not elite to elite, if you want to put it that way, Emma. And a lot of the schools that are actually involved try and support scholarship pupils to go to secondary in Malawi, to try and encourage them to stay in education. For that, so I can understand what you're saying, but it's not elite to elite in that sense. But very few of the primary schools in Scotland will actually visit Malawi, simply because they don't take the youngsters out there at that age.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ian, for clarifying that. Gift, I was just going to pick up on a point that was made earlier on by one of the speakers, that volunteering internationally is not just about money, it's about attitudes and perceptions. Do you feel that by getting involved in the dialogues, did you find that those people coming to Malawi from Scotland and engaging in those dialogues, did you find that they were open-minded and they were, they were willing to learn and they were willing to come and learn about what you had to say? Did they have a positive attitude towards building that relationship, did you find?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. That like I think they did have like quite a really positive way, of looking at these things and being able to be open enough to learn, and also being open to be criticized about certain things, because the way as well the dialogue works, not only are they just coming in to have the dialogue or in these workshops at stake, but prior to that, there's also sort of like a pre-session, a preparatory session that is carried out. When I was in Scotland, would go, for instance, me and Emma would go to George Watson's, where we'll do different presentations. And one of the things that like is talked about in there is that, like, it's not the shark, but like, it's the sea that we swim in, that Emma usually will talk about. That, like, some of these issues, it's not that like it's the student themselves, but maybe it's the way that like things are normalized, that like, oh, this is how you need to behave when you go there and stuff. So in the way that, like, because we've had this session before, when they come in as well, they already know some of these things. And then when we're having this discussion, they've already had that preparation session. It does help for them to be open enough to learn. But then also at the same time, because even us, even though we are facilitating, we are also very open in terms of like learning what they have to say and hearing from them. So there's sort of like that openness on both sides in terms of like being able to learn from one another. But then at the same time as well, it doesn't just stop from there, because later on we do talk about like, okay, what are we going to do? So for example, if we're talking about the environmental issues, when we do go back, it's about changing some of the behaviors, some of the ways that they do things, because, we look at the sort of like maybe the impact that like, it's sort of like the environment, some of our behaviors are impacting the environment. So it's not just about having a discussion and learning, but also there's a key thing that's about like, okay, what then are we going to do when we do go back out there? So yeah, in a short, I would say that.
Thank you very much, Gift. That's great. Thank you so much for your contributions. Irma and Mitch, just a question that was raised earlier on about the value of short-term partnerships, what impact you can make over a week or 2 weeks. Irma, I just wonder if you've got any comments on that, and then Mitch about what you can do within those very short-term visits rather than looking at long-term volunteering commitment.
Testing, 1, 2.
Irma, sorry.
Yeah, I mean it very much depends on what you're gonna do with those 2 weeks. So but I still would say if it's with young people, so for example, if you would bring them into a dialogue, you don't need to have like a really, you could do that in a day or two. I don't know how Steka skills, how long.
You've muted yourself by accident, Irma, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think for so what I find so powerful, what Gift is saying and what Emma was showing, is that it develops a certain skill and some sort of critical thinking that you could do in sessions that you fit when you bring go for a short-term visit. However, I think there would be a bit of a preparation beforehand to have these young people going into this mindset of we're going to share, we're going to enter a dialogue. So I would probably then view it like this. But yeah, I'm a bit more hesitant on doing very short term or ad hoc, maybe things that are not so embedded in this, helping these young people develop this type of skills.
Okay, thank you. And Mitch, maybe a comment on that short-term partnerships, but also any comments on work that you've done and you're doing in your new role to evaluate the value of these partnerships and what does come out of them.
Well, I'll probably say that if I take my own group at Beef, for example, we're volunteering throughout the whole year. The youngsters come along, they take part, we help fundraise for projects which are actually asked for by our colleagues out in Malawi. We help support them with the cholera epidemic. We've helped them build scenes that were damaged after storms and everything else. So I don't see them, any trip they get is going to be the sort of culmination of their volunteering time for that. And I don't see the trip necessarily as being a volunteers. Yes, we go in and help in classrooms and X, Y, and Z, but I don't necessarily see that as a short-term volunteering trip. As was discussed earlier on, people going out for a week, 2 weeks elsewhere. There's certainly evidence in the scoping project that we've done recently through the Scottish Government there, the long-term effects are quite apparent to youngsters here. It does mean a lot to them. It has actually changed lives. It has actually changed their perspective on how they see themselves. I mean, that was mentioned in Emma's video as well, about how you take a perspective on your own life then when you see somebody else, perhaps just as that stimulus for it. So yeah, there's certainly evidence there. There's the long-term lasting effects on both sides.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just come to keep you on, Mitch, for now, then Emma, then Irma, for some final thoughts. When we are looking at kind of guidelines for future international volunteering and school partnerships, from your own experience, what should be at the heart of that? Maybe just one or two key points. I know there's so many things to discuss here, but Mitch, first of all, from your experience, what should be at the heart of these guidelines?
Well, I would go back to some of the both Irma and Emma brought up as well about sustainable development goals, and actually having a goal for the partnership. It's not just a case of maybe help to do some good. I think there has to be something to do more than that. I mean, a lot of the partnerships we have are capital building projects. Schools are helping develop schools across in Malawi, some through other organisations like Classrooms for Malawi. But I think there has to be something more than that. I think there has to be a change actually in people's perceptions on life and trying to make the whole world a better place. To me, that's the bottom line about global citizenship, is to try and make the world itself a better place.
Okay, thank you. Emma, any thoughts about what should be at the heart of the new guidelines?
I think there has to be, I think they have to seriously address power and how you disrupt centuries of oppression and a culture of donor dependency in Malawi and a culture of aid-framed representations in the UK. And it's not something that's easy to do. As I say, we've spent 15 years developing the model of critical dialogue. But if that doesn't happen, I don't think it's going to work as effectively as it could.
Okay, thank you, Emma. And Irma, sort of reflecting back 3 years on from your report, again, what do you think needs to be at the heart of the new guidelines for good practice?
Well, I think it's both what Emma and you touched upon, is that, but I would add that I would kind of root it in this kind of peer-to-peer learning on critical thinking and this developing a skill. So it's developing maybe an attitude or but it's also developing the skill of really questioning these structural power imbalances, or this kind of what is social justice and how to address problems. So there's problems that are shared, like the climate crisis. There's also marginalization, and there's also poverty in Scotland. So there's a skill that both parties, I think, can gain from a partnership, like what the dialogues are doing. That will be, could be kind of the heart of this learning process.
Great. Thank you very much indeed to Irma, to Mitch and to Emma, and of course to Gift for joining us there. Some fantastic contributions. Again, we spent about 40 minutes or so on something that could, be well dealt with in a conference over several days. So we appreciate that we are sketching over the issues here, but hopefully they are starting some conversations and giving all of you some thoughts about your own contribution to developing new guidelines. So thank you very much, everybody, for your terrific contributions in that session. We're going to move straight into the second panel discussion now, which moves on from school partnerships to early career volunteering. And we've got 4 speakers again in this session, so we'll need to move on quite quickly. First of all, I'm going to welcome Oiza Momo, who is Senior Manager in the Office of the Chief Scientific Officer at pharmaceuticals company GSK. She's a trustee of the McConnell International Foundation, and she's a former First Aid Africa volunteer. Oiza, I'm hoping you can share some of your thoughts on early career volunteering, specifically based on your own experience. Over to you.
Thank you very much, David. First of all, I'll check that you can hear me. If you could give me a thumbs up, that'd be great. Okay, I see that. I wanted to say a big thank you to Jack in particular for inviting me to come and speak in this panel. As you said, I work at GSK, a biopharmaceutical company based in London, and I'm a trustee of the McConnell International Foundation. But I'm here speaking in a personal capacity about my own experience of volunteering and the benefits, I hope, of early career volunteering. And for me personally, I think I can categorize them quickly in 3 buckets. The first one I think we've heard a lot about already, and that's the mutually beneficial relationship that you get from volunteering. Particularly that piece around empathy, building understanding, and global citizenship. The second would be around organizational benefits. So as an early career volunteer, I was able to bring back and upskill myself really and bring back those skills to the organizations that supported me in volunteering in the first place, and learn a lot about how my own organization could benefit from that experience, and hopefully also the partner organization that I was volunteering with. And finally, the personal benefit. For me personally, I built up a lot of resilience through my volunteering, communication skills, confidence, life skills more generally, and that would be my third bucket of benefits. There are some risks, I think, to this volunteering through an early career stage, and I think hopefully in the panel, Dave will be able to speak through some of those in a bit more detail. I'm aware we're short on time.
Okay, thank you very much, Oiza, for getting some points on the table there. Our second speaker in this session is David Adair, who is Head of Community Engagement at PwC. And David oversees PwC's community investment in the UK, which is a contribution totaling over £10 million in cash, time and in-kind support for this financial year. David, over to you for your own experience on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, David. And good afternoon, I think it is now, everyone. I'd just like to echo what Oiza said about thanking Jack and giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of PwC. We support social enterprises, social entrepreneurs. In fact, we hosted the Social Enterprise World Forum in Edinburgh. I had to look, it was 2018. It only seems like yesterday. And so big supporters of Social Enterprise World Forum and in the One Young World, where young people, we hosted an event in Belfast where young people came from across the different territories. We are very conscious about our environmental footprint. I was really interested listening to Gift earlier about some of the issues around global volunteering. We're not a global organisation. In fact, each territory supports their local area. So we don't fly volunteers to India or Africa. We work very closely with the local office to encourage young people there to volunteer. But the benefits to us are very, very real. Staff at PwC get a lot of technical training. We have 1,000 young graduates every year, but not so much of the softer skills that Oiza mentioned, like empathy, listening to others, putting yourself in other people's shoes. And if we're going to be more representative for our clients, a more diverse organisation, we need to represent the communities in which we operate. So we need our young people to know some of the issues, both local and globally, that communities are facing. So volunteering for us is the perfect way for young people to get a broader sort of training on issues and cultural differences. We're a multicultural organisation, and I use that term. I'm a big fan of multicultural societies, and we all learn from each other. I think I'll leave it there for now, and we can have a discussion.
Okay, thank you, David. Next up, we have a very long-standing international volunteer, Dr. Stuart Ferguson, who is a consultant surgeon in the Shetland Islands and a regular professional volunteer in Rwanda and Zambia. From 2016 to 17, Stuart was a clinical leadership fellow at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons in Glasgow, and he co-led the college's report on the value of international volunteering by NHS Scotland workers, called Global Citizenship in the Scottish Health Service. So plenty to go at there. Stuart, over to you for some initial thoughts.
Thank you, David. I thought I'd paint a picture of where I'm coming from in terms of my personal experience of volunteering. Happy to talk more about the report that I was involved in 7 years ago now, and how that actually provided a blueprint for the whole Scottish Health Service on how it could better utilise the potential of volunteering to benefit staff in the UK, patients in the UK, but also colleagues and patients abroad. But I thought I'd give a flavour of my personal involvements abroad, and hopefully Claire is able to share a PowerPoint on my behalf. Thank you, Claire. I don't know if you're able to press F5 yet. Perfect. The next slide, thanks. So my first experience is abroad in a professional context, where as a medical student, and I spent 5 weeks in Bolivia. Hugely valuable for me to be in a different cultural and language context. Hugely increased my appreciation for the difficulties that others not from an English-speaking background face when they encounter healthcare in the UK. It really got me excited about international travel and health challenges elsewhere. Next slide, thanks. As a senior medical student, I spent 5 weeks in Malawi at Kwendeni Hospital. I suspect some will be aware of that. Next slide. My sister lived and worked in Zambia for 10 years, and a while ago, I had a week of what I think I will call voluntourism. I visited a mission hospital in a very remote part of the country that I'd heard a lot about. And I certainly did participate as a surgeon in a few operations, but it was mainly about me trying to understand the context and weighing up my thoughts about working counterculturally in the future. Next slide. For the last 7-8 years, I've been volunteering regularly in Rwanda for a short, targeted time, delivering a specific surgical training course. And over the course of our time there, we've trained many Rwandan faculty to, I hope, an excellent standard. Rwandan faculty are now very largely delivering this course, but with a degree of mentoring, support, and additional infrastructure from ourselves. Next slide. My more substantial experience was 5 months in Zambia, back at that place where I had a taster visit, this time working as a fully qualified surgeon. My wife and I were there and thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. We hope we provided some support and relief to the staff, working very hard in the midst of COVID, and I visited that myself last year as well. Next slide. All of that context has been really important for me personally in what I do now. I'm a consultant surgeon in the Shetland Islands. This is a place that has a population of 23,000 people. We're 110 miles north of the Scottish mainland, and our referral hospital, if we need a higher level of care, is Aberdeen, 200 miles away. So that's 12 hours on a ferry or an aeromedical transfer. This is an unusual environment within the UK Health Service, and it's one in which, as a healthcare professional, you have to regularly work beyond normal boundaries of training. I'm a general surgeon, which in the UK is actually not too general. Here in Shetland, I also have to treat and assess fractures, urology, and so on. And I've trained up to be able to do hip replacements and such like for trauma settings. I think the kind of mentality that you need in a place like Shetland is very different from the mentality you need most places around the Scottish Health Service. You need to have a can-do attitude. You need to be flexible. And certainly my experiences abroad, observing and working alongside healthcare professionals in less resource contexts has emphasized to me that the generic training that I have has given me many transferable skills. And I'm very grateful for my international experience for highlighting that and developing it. Next slide. I won't talk too much about this, but David referenced the report that I co-wrote, focusing on volunteering in the NHS. And if you want to read that report, you'll see that we itemize many individual benefits to staff members from volunteering and clear system benefits, recruitment, retention, system capacity building, and such like. I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Stuart. And again, the report that Stuart's mentioned there, the link is in the box. So you can reference that along with various other resources that have been mentioned today. Finally, in this session, before we go to a discussion, we'll hear from Peace Amaro, who is Senior Associate with the Challengers Group, currently based in Rwanda. She was formerly the Programme Lead for the Youth to Work programme in Uganda, and she's a passionate advocate of young people realising their leadership potential to solve global challenges, and is dedicated also to helping address employment issues facing young people in Africa. And she believes every young person should embrace volunteering at the beginning of their career journey. So Peace, over to you for your initial comments, please, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, David, for the introduction. Just like David said, my name is Peace Amaro, and I am currently working with Challenges Rwanda as a senior associate, and also working as a product development manager for one of our very prestigious scholarship programs that emphasizes on the support that junior to mid-level employees in renewable energy space and those in the construction space get the necessary support to advance in their careers. So aside from what I'm currently doing, I want to say that the reason I'm here today is because I took a step, I don't know, very many years ago to volunteer, and that is why I'm actually here today. If it wasn't for my voluntary experience, I don't think I would have had the confidence to apply for the positions I currently have. I don't think I would have been able to contribute or create the impact that I have been able to create over the years of experience I've had supporting young people, especially in my various roles within the Youth Work Program. So I have been able to not only benefit from this experience, but I have also been able to contribute highly within the organizations that I have been able to volunteer in. For example, I don't know if I'm supposed to get into detail right now, but I just wanted to highlight one of the benefits of the organization that I was posted in. In 2017, I was placed, of course, under the ICS voluntary program, under Challenges Worldwide. I was placed within an organization which is meant to contribute in the renewable energy space. So my contribution to this organization was basically trying to analyze and diagnose, what the business strengths are and their weaknesses. And throughout this process, we were able to determine exactly what this business needs to do in order to increase their sales. Not only were we able to identify these solutions, we were also given the opportunity to implement the solutions just to make sure that our solutions actually make sense. So after, my experience trying to implement this, of course, with my colleague or my counterpart, this organization was able to realize a 90% increase in their sales. And this is from volunteers who had no experience whatsoever. This was basically because we were given the platform to implement our ideas, and also the organization had the confidence that we do have the potential, and all we needed was to implement and showcase this potential. So I think with that, I'm going to stop here, and I'll be able to share more of what the benefits really are for myself, for the organization, and not only that, but also for the people around me, how this has been able to become a ripple effect, not just with my family, but also with the friends and colleagues as a whole. So thank you, David. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Peace. What do you think it was? I'll just ask you this question first. What do you think it was about your own experiences of volunteering that was structured in such a way that helped you gain that confidence and gain those skills that you've taken forward? What do you think characterizes a well-structured volunteer experience that delivers that mutual benefit, if you like?
I will start by saying, before one goes ahead and decides that they want to volunteer, they definitely have made this decision based on the fact that they are not aware, at least this is from my personal experience, they are not aware of what kind of career path they want to take. And that brings me to my first point, which is having the organizations being able to provide a platform for us, young people, or for anyone out there trying to volunteer, to explore every avenue within the organization you get. So if I am able to, if I'm not restricted in, let's say, an organization says all I need is sales, so I'm literally placed in the sales department, that doesn't really help me identify the areas of weakness or areas of improvement. So being able to give us allowance or give someone an allowance to explore every area of, let's say, an organization, every area of a project, they will be able to understand what or realize what their passion really is, because in most cases we don't really understand, or we don't know what our passion is, or what the cause we want to actually work towards is. So being able to explore various aspects of a project, one organization, gives you the opportunity to understand what exactly that means to me. Does this align with my values? Does this align, with the kind of career path I want to take? So I would totally advocate for one, let young people explore every area, so that they're able to understand and narrow down on exactly what they need to take. Number two, I have had experience, not just myself, but also with the young people I've been able to support during the youth work program. We have had organizations explicitly mention that they lack confidence in young people simply because they don't have the experience. And this is very detrimental to the mindset or to the mental health of a young person, because going into a project knowing I am not fully trusted is definitely going to make me underperform, because at the end of the day, you don't really trust me to perform anything. So why do I actually have to put in 110% to make sure I succeed? That will make sense. So making sure that we as host organizations clearly showcase the confidence we have in these young people, even before they showcase their potential, is going to be something, it's going to definitely contribute a lot to the success of this person's voluntary experience. So for me, it is making sure that you showcase the confidence you have in this young person, because then that is how you uncover the potential that they have. And in the long run, you will definitely be able to see this potential. Number two, let them be, give them the trust and let them know that they can fully explore and uncover their full potential, basically.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Oisa, I wonder if I can put a similar question to you from your experience of what was it in the way that your volunteering was structured that worked well for you, And just a second question there is, how well, in your experience, are those different benefits balanced? So the personal benefit, the organizational benefit, and above all else, the mutual benefit. Sorry, that's two quite big questions, but go for it.
I'm making a note so I make sure to answer both. But I first of all loved Peace's answer on giving young people the platform. I think that's my first answer to your question, to be honest, David, around what worked well. Having the platform, having the visibility to the different opportunities. In my case, I was taking part in skills-based volunteering, First Aid Africa. So I was already a volunteer and a first aider in Scotland through St Andrew's First Aid, which is our national first aid organisation and charity in Scotland. And I've been doing that for about 6 years or so before I volunteered with First Aid Africa. The benefits that First Aid Africa gave that made it work well as a volunteering programme was really the training. So yes, I was certified already and I understood, how to apply first aid in the context that I was in Scotland. But when it went to my volunteering programme in Kenya, in Ndiwa, Kenya, I really needed to understand the context in which we were going into and how I was going to deliver this training opportunity. It was skills-based volunteering where I was training trainers, so community-based organisations, police officers, nurses, market traders, those different community groups. And so the training and the contextual piece really helped me there. That really made the whole thing a success. And the other thing that I'd add is understanding expectations and anticipated impact. So the expectations of those community groups that I just mentioned, First Aid Africa built really strong relationships and partnerships with those groups in order to describe and define what it was that they needed from us as volunteers. So I could always go back to that as a frame of reference, is what I'm about to do as a volunteer aligned to those expectations? And what's the impact? Am I really meeting those things? I think that's what ultimately makes this whole thing a success. Okay. In terms of the balance, I think you asked me, balance of those 3 benefit buckets, as I called them: personal, organizational, and mutual. I think, honestly, selfishly, I as a volunteer focus on the personal benefits that I took away from that experience and have carried on through my various volunteering experiences. But the organizational benefits, I think, shouldn't be missed. I think they're always quite implicit in an experience like this. But the call out, if I would make it to volunteers going out with First Aid Africa or other organisations going forward, is to make sure that those are explicit, that they're really called out in the volunteering opportunities, so that organisations sending volunteers abroad or conducting volunteering within their own country make sure that there is that benefit back to the organisation, that it's a sustainable programme. And finally, obviously, to the community groups that you are partnering with, I think that organisational and mutual benefits really should play a high role there. And First Aid Africa do it brilliantly. It's a trainer programme where volunteers from Scotland train community groups, as I mentioned, who then go on to train others within their communities. So hopefully that mutual benefit is realised.
Okay, thank you very much. David, just coming back to you, Aisha there's talked about things like choices, expectations, and kind of evaluation. I just wonder what PwC does in terms of deciding who gets the opportunity to do this, so the choices, what you expect of them in terms of outcome, and how you then evaluate those different buckets of benefit, if you like, to make sure it's not just happening in a kind of vacuum.
Yeah, sure, David. It's music to my ears to hear you used to say that the skills-based volunteering is what you did, because we aim for 50% of our volunteering to be skills-based. And it may not surprise you as an accountancy firm that we love a survey. We love to survey our beneficiaries, our volunteers. What are they going to expect to get out of it? What are the beneficiaries getting out of it? I think it really has to be planned very well, and you do need to have the relevant training. Very humbling to hear the work that Stuart and his colleagues do, and you may see, well, what value can accountants or consultants bring to this? Well, actually, we can do a lot. We do a lot with our British Red Cross are on here today. We have groups of young people that help them with logistics. When there are disasters overseas, we give people 6 days a year to support those, and it may be on the ground with those kinds of things. But I think really it is to have a clear plan so that the volunteer themselves knows what they're getting out of it. And I have a slight issue with the term volunteering, particularly with our young people. The average age is 28. We like to call it social action or social impact, because the idea of volunteering is you're giving something and you're not getting anything back. And when we do really see it as a two-way street. Okay, thank you. Stuart, and just wonder what you think about that terminology first of all, but there's a question about not, you've been, I'll use the phrase volunteering, excuse me if you want to use a different term, for a number of years now. What about that question that somebody, I think it's Heather Kuby has raised, this idea that we can carry on having social impact through volunteering throughout our lives, that there is a focus very much on early career. But how do you reflect on your own experience, and how do we embed that maybe in a better way so that we can get value out of people at all stages of their career, not just at the beginning?
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, on the question of what is volunteering, in the report that the link for it is there on the chat, Global Citizenship and the Scottish Health Service, we used a definition that was come up with by what was then the Scottish Executive, which was volunteering was giving of time and energy through a third party, bringing benefits to the volunteer, beneficiaries, groups, organisations, communities, a choice undertaken of one's own free will and not motivated primarily for financial gain or for a wage or a salary. So that implies that you might have a degree of financial support in doing what you're doing, but it's not your motivation in doing so. So that's the definition we used. And I do think that volunteering can play different roles at different stages of career. So for me, I think when I visited Chitokoloki Mission Hospital in Zambia as a very early surgical trainee, I was accruing much more benefit personally than I was giving out. There was very few skills I had that any local individuals didn't have, but it did give me a context and an understanding to prepare for and come back to. And for 5 months, I was a fully trained consultant surgeon, and I was absolutely training, delivering service at hopefully a high level. And there's a little bit of tension here because arguably health professionals, talking about my context, at an earlier stage of their training have more to gain from this kind of supercharged experience that they often get in a resource poor context. Whereas what a resource poorer context really wants is someone at the top of their profession who can provide tremendous added value, a career's worth of perspective. And I think there needs to be some understanding that there's value in voluntary work at both of those stages.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. David, if I can just come back to you and just pick it up on that point, the accountancy advisory firms love a survey. I just wonder whether you've got any particular reflections on, what does and what doesn't work particularly well in terms of delivering the phrase social impact that you talked about, whether you've got any broad observations throughout your work at PwC.
Yeah, thanks, David. I don't want to get tied up with semantics on words because volunteering is obviously very important. But I think the key thing is that if people know what the purpose is of what they're doing and what the impact is going to be, sometimes you're on projects where you can't see what the final impact is going to be. So I think it's really important from the start that people are aware of the impact that they can have. And also collectively, we find volunteering is an excellent way of getting people to work together with different viewpoints, with different ideas, and see things from a different lens. So I think that the group activity, I think The other thing that we're finding is young people are really keen to share their digital skills. It's something that is very key to kind of the future of making the volunteers have an impact in a maybe a shorter time scale. So those are the kind of the key things, and also 75% of our volunteers that we survey say they couldn't have got the softer skills in any other way than through volunteering. It's just an excellent way. As I mentioned earlier, they get a lot of technical training, but we don't always affirm a focus in their early years on those softer skills of group work, empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, and volunteering is just an excellent way to do that, and very cost effective.
Yeah, thank you very much. Interesting. I'm just going to come to each of the panelists now, and just with the thought of the purpose of this whole event in mind, trying to think about what international volunteering looks like and guidelines for good practice. I just wonder if each of you might share a couple of thoughts about, again, what you feel should be at the heart of good quality international volunteering as we look at developing guidelines for good practice. And again, you know, reflecting on your own experiences there. So Peace, if I can come to you first, you know, what do you think should be right at the heart of that good practice for the future of international volunteering?
Thank you, David, once again. Every time I think about not just international volunteering, but volunteering as a whole, the first thing that comes to mind is the welfare of volunteers. Not just in terms of, I love the definition Stuart gave of what volunteering really is, not just in terms of, you know, financial welfare, but everything to do with safeguarding. You know, this is something that as the Youth to Work program, I know it's coming to an end now, but this is something that we always put at the forefront of any partnership we have with our host organizations. So safeguarding is really key, especially in terms of providing the mental health of our volunteers. Yes, they are coming into our organizations to learn. We always say, oh, we're giving you an opportunity to learn, you know, to gain experience, because no one else is going to do that. However, we need to also understand that they are coming to give back. They're giving us their time. They are literally giving us their talent, their untapped talent. So they're literally giving us themselves. They have sacrificed to stay away from their families for a while, and they're moving to foreign countries, foreign environments to literally give them your all, I mean, to give you their all. So for me, it's having solid safeguarding policies to protect not just the volunteers. Of course, yes, I always advocate for volunteers, but also to safeguard the people that they are going to work with, you know, in the different organizations that they are in. We have people from different cultures who have different values. How do we make sure that we all understand what this looks like, and how are we going to make sure that we are protecting everyone involved in whatever cause that we are working towards? So for me, if there's one thing, it would be that. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Peace. And Stuart, you've put my answers here in the box, but if you just want to summarize, you know, what you think should be at the heart of the guidelines.
Sure. Well, yeah. So I've referenced there that the NHS Scotland Global Citizenship Programme came up with a Doing It Well guide, which is very comprehensive, and I would certainly refer you to that. I just wanted to pick up on a point that David made around valuing volunteering. I think one of the keys here is that we need to boost the cultural expectations and views around volunteering and international work. I can tell you that as a surgical trainee, that it would be much more easy for me to get time away from my surgical training to do academic work, to do a PhD, to do an MD, or whatever else. If I said to my training program, I'm going to spend a year in Malawi, in Rwanda, in Zambia, etc., that is a much more difficult fight, because there's simply not the perception of value that there is placed culturally in academia. I'm talking about my health context. So we need to see that, yes, we're hopefully thoughtfully doing good, not doing harm, but we need to recognize that international work absolutely brings tangible benefits to individuals and organizations from countries that they're leaving from. That's what I want to emphasize.
Okay, thanks very much, Stuart. David, a brief final thought from you?
Yeah, no, I agree totally with what Stuart said, but I would say just to ensure that each project has clear objectives and everybody involved knows what they are, that there's a system in place to measure the impact, not just on the volunteer, but on the beneficiaries, and then to look at the sustainability of a project rather than going in and doing different projects. Is there a way of handing those projects on so that they become sustainable?
Okay, thank you. And is there a final thought from you? Oh, I think you're muted, Oisa.
Thank
Sorry.
you. I really echo what the panelists have said so far, but I'd say for the age group, we're talking about... How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I think so. Can you try again?
I was saying skills-based for the age group that we're talking about here, purpose-led and impact-centred.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you so much. Some great final answers there. A lot of thought-provoking comments again in that panel to feed into the purpose of this seminar. But thank you so much to Peace, to David, to Stuart and Oisa for their tremendous contributions there. We're going to move in now to our last session in this unfeasibly packed event and ask what could new volunteering look like, again, particularly for early career professionals. And for this session, we're joined by Ross McKenzie, who is Director of Venture Support, a Challengers Group, and by Amy Earnshaw-Blake, an Associate Consultant at Challengers Catalyst. So Ross and Amy, I will now hand over to you for the final session of the day. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are there some slides coming up?
There, yeah, just 1 sec. I'm just going to get you up first of all and take Stuart off.
Do you just want to
give just to
no pressure, Stuart?
Oh. So the title of this session is actually "What could the new volunteering model look like?" That's what Amy and I are going to talk about today. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Claire. In fact, Amy, you go first.
I will do. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. It's nice to see everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this really important conference. Actually, Claire, are you on slides? Could you move forward? Thank you. I'm just going to introduce myself and then hand over to Ross. So I'm Amy Blake, and I'm a consultant at the moment with the Challengers Group. So at the moment, I'm working with Ross in the Venture Lab, which Ross will talk to you a little bit more about in a minute. And what we're looking at is coming up with a new model for international volunteering. So this is a very timely conference for us, and it's been really great. I've got loads of notes here, which we're going to take into the great melting pot that we are working on in the Venture Lab. Previously, my experience around volunteering was at Classrooms for Malawi, where we worked with schools partnerships overseas, and I was also the director of the International Voluntary Service for quite a few years, running various different international development volunteer programs, some of which were great, some of which required some more thought and structure behind them. So my experience of volunteering is probably around about 9 years. And it's something that Ross and I feel passionate about. I'll hand over to Ross now to introduce himself, and he can tell you a bit about his volunteer background.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Similar, Amy and I have both spent a lot of time in the international volunteering sector, but we'll move straight on and tell you what we're going to do about that. So on to the next slide. but actually maybe just a little bit about challenges for those that don't know. Thank you so much to Peace for representing so well. That was amazing. But if you don't know about challenges, we've been around for 25 years. We're an international enterprise support organisation. We have a history and legacy in international volunteering, and we're part of the International Citizen Service programme that was talked about earlier on. We've currently got offices in Ghana, Malawi, Rwanda, Uganda, Zambia, and the UK. On to the next slide. So I won't go on too much about the Ventures Lab because that's a different thing, but just to tell you, this is something that Challenges are doing to support social enterprises. A lot of them are spin-outs for universities, some are carve-outs from NGOs or charities. But what Amy and I have been doing is asking the question, what is the role of, or actually asking the question, is there a role for international volunteering in the post-COVID age? And if so, what should it look like? And if we're encouraged by that, how could we create a social enterprise around this? I think it's fair to say we're both very passionate and proud about the work we've done in international volunteering when it's done well. But we're also highly aware that at its worst, international volunteering can be deeply harmful, rooted in white saviorism and neocolonialism. However, at its best, and what we've seen and what we're proud of, is that it can be transformative, empowering, and hugely impactful. So we've been talking to lots of people for the last few months. We really want to kind of take a partnership, informed approach to this. And we've got 3 ideas that we're going to share with you today about where we've got to so far, but we're certainly not here to say that, this is it, we have all the answers, and this is what the new model should look like. We're open and we're listening. Our working title is Volunteering 2.0, and this recognises that we want to kind of take the best of the best practices been out there so far and avoid any of the pitfalls that have happened in the past. And interestingly, we're not even sure if we want to call it volunteering. I think someone alluded to this in the last session. There's so much loaded and there's so much baggage in this word that it kind of feels a little bit like sometimes you're on the back foot right from the start. We've not got the right word yet, but maybe you'll help us find it. On to you, Amy.
Thank you, Claire. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So as Ross mentioned, we're calling it Volunteering 2.0, but that's because we haven't come up with a different name for that yet. So we are really aware that volunteering has the connotations that we've already spoken about over the past sort of 2.5 hours, and we're aware that it immediately conjures up images that we are really a little bit uncomfortable with, actually, Ross and I, and in the Venture Lab and all the organizations that we've spoken about. So we're using the word, but it's not something that we feel really describes necessarily some of the huge value that we've already talked about, especially in the last session, around the value of volunteering and emphasizing the really good parts of it. So the initiative within the Venture Lab is to create sustainable, equitable, and impactful models for international volunteering. And then what we're looking at really is customizing programs that harness skills, so skills-based, as we talked about in the previous session, looking at diverse experiences and then uniting those with partner organizations to address specific challenges which have been identified by those partner organizations. So we really want to make sure that we're flipping this on its head so that we are representing, or we are providing skills into the organizations that they clearly themselves have identified, rather than the other way around, where it becomes inequitable, is when it's a sort of top-down approach. So we're really keen to make sure that the models that we come up with and the future of Volunteering 2.0 is the other way around to how it has previously been, and also recognizing that we have a response, or that the organizations that facilitate volunteer programs have a responsibility to set up those programs well. It's not fair for the volunteer necessarily to be taking or to be made to feel that they aren't doing good, or because young people are coming through a system where they're told throughout school, they're maybe doing Duke of Edinburgh, they're doing different programs within school, they are really encouraged to volunteer, and then it's really not fair at the end of it to say, oh well, you can't do that overseas, by the way. So we have to have responsibility for those young people to make sure that if we are going to do overseas volunteering, that those placements are really clearly defined at the outset, which we've already talked about quite clearly in the last session. But that's our responsibility to make sure that's the case, and it's not really fair to then place the responsibility on the volunteer. Over to Russ. I think actually it's over to me. Claire, can I have the next slide? So the purpose that we have at the moment is to unite individuals and organizations with a shared purpose and empower them to be catalysts for change. So we want to resource civil society with exceptional individuals, expertise, training, skills to accelerate community-led change. So we want to make sure that we are bringing forward young people that have, I think it was Stuart or David in the last session talked about the importance of bringing, young people have got so many skills that can be brought to the table here, you know, specifically around digital, which was already mentioned, looking at how we can bring different business skills to the table. So we want to make sure that we're providing placements which actually acknowledge the skills that we can provide. We want to build a robust network of local partners, so we can do this in collaboration with our in-country offices within Challenges. We can also do that with you guys on this call. You know, we want to encourage at the end of this for people to come forward into this melting pot of ideas that we're working on in Challenges, and to see, you know, how we can take this forward together. We want to provide a range of community-led programs that meet both organizational and individual needs. And we want to identify and train. So the pre-departure training has come up a lot during the conversations, and the real importance of not just landing somebody in country with no idea, no training before they've arrived, and not a clear outcome of how they're going to be taking part in the placement. So we want to make sure that that's done up front, and we want to make sure that we use the skills and experience that we have within the team, within Challenges, within the team within Scotland, to make sure that we can deliver high quality programs around volunteering. Now it's you, Ross.
Thanks. Maybe just skip 2 slides, Claire, because we've probably hammered home the next one enough. Let's go. Okay, so neither Amy or I are attached to Forum Global Volunteering Standard, but we did do previous work for it in former lives, and just wanted to flag that it is out there. If you're not aware of it, highly recommend going to have a look. Just Google Global Volunteering Standard Forum. There's a self-assessment you can do in there, and that's oh, thank you, someone just dropped it. That's a really good link. And now we will actually tell you about what the 3 ideas we've come up with are so far.
Next slide, please. So the 3 core focus areas, so these are our 3 baskets, similar to the previous the discussion. So we have global youth entrepreneurs. So Challenges really work with enterprises and entrepreneurs. So we really work with developing the skills of young people, social enterprise, small business. So that's a real strength of Challenges, and that's something that we believe we could apply to the new model for volunteering. So really looking at the skills of young people and looking at entrepreneur skills, business skills, enterprise. It's a huge requirement across the Global South to look at job creation and skills development, and particularly around green skills. So that's the first focus area that we'll be doing further research into. The second one is around responsible and more sustainable university placements and university electives, so similar to Stuart in the previous panel. So having a look at how those placements could be done more effectively and more efficiently. And the third focus area is around corporate corporate accelerator programs pro bono. I saw somebody in the chat mentioned about BSO earlier on, so the British Executive Service Overseas. So looking at how we might regenerate that program and take that forward into the new model for volunteering. Claire, could I have the next slide? So probably, I'm not sure if we've got tons of time to go over this, but what we can do is we'll whiz through it really quickly, and then we can, if you want to, we'll be around. Obviously, drop us an email to talk to us about these in more detail. But the youth entrepreneurs, so that, as I mentioned before, would be to connect young entrepreneurs with change makers. So Peace previously mentioned about our Youth to Work program, which is currently in Uganda, but this would be an extension of that in country. So working really directly with young entrepreneurs in country, and then providing peer support for young volunteers from Scotland, being able to partner in and look at peer exchange, peer support around the entrepreneur social enterprise space. We think that, as Peace was mentioning before, this really provides really great hands-on entrepreneurial experience and gives young people that chance to have that sort of 360 look at an organization, and also to not go straight in and think, oh yes, I want to work in marketing, or yes, I want to work in sales. But as Peace mentioned, that having that opportunity early on in career enabled for her to have a really good insight into an organization and then take forward that into her future roles. We really want to look at green skills development. So this is obviously a huge area, and it's something that we think that young people really are, well, it's really important, but that young people are miles ahead than us in where they want to get to. And we have a responsibility to enable or to provide green skills training. Obviously, it promotes international collaboration, that we've already talked about, and fosters youth participation. But it's a different way of looking at youth connection. It's a different way, because if we can develop skills whilst at the same time looking at participation, cultural exchange, then we think that this should provide a deeper experience. Ross?
Yeah, okay, I'm looking at the time, and I know that we need to wrap it up. So if we can move forward. Just really simply, this next pillar is around global placement-based studies. So that is placement-based dissertations, electives, and scholarships. There's a big demand for it, and this can be done equitably and meaningfully and impactfully in both directions. Next slide, please. We do have something similar that we do with Heriot-Watt University through the Dennis Goldberg Scholarship. These are master's degrees in areas particularly around construction, renewable and sustainable development. And if we just go, actually skip forward 2 slides. I'm flagging a quote there which says the challenges model is a development win-win, supporting aspiring young people to get jobs in SMEs to grow their business. The reason I've put that there is because that is what we want to challenge in ourselves to make this pillar about. That's what we kind of are going to strive for. We think there's a real opportunity there. And that is the second pillar. On to the third.
The next slide, please. So this is the third pillar, which I mentioned at the start, was corporate. So we've just recently run 2 one-week programs with Molson Coors. So we had 45 of their staff, global team, are working with us over a 1-week accelerator, a break, and then another week accelerator. And we brought in 12 social enterprises to work with their young leaders. So this was the Molson Coors Young Leaders Program, those in their early career. And so we work with them on bringing particular business initiatives to the table. And over 5 days, we led them through a process which was extremely useful to the social enterprises, and also enabled the team from Molson Coors to be able to develop their leadership and learning skills over the course of 5 days. So that's they're going to be part of a much longer program, but we felt that that offered a really great pilot for us within this project to then look at how we would then work at skills development, leadership programs, and partnering with corporates. Can I grab the next slide? And then within the corporate skills exchange as well, then this is more looking at probably those slightly, not necessarily at the early stage of career, but maybe those that have either had a career, looking at those sort of later on in their careers that are able to then provide pro bono support and time back into organizations. So this is much more on the sort of more senior skills-based volunteering, similar to the BSO model. And that would be for senior leaders, particularly in social enterprises and NGOs, to tackle real issues with senior staff in their counterparts in country. So both Ross and I have worked on these programs before. We've worked on these in the different organizations that we have been involved in. And what we've done with Volunteering 2.0 is really looked at the programs that we felt had worked and why they'd worked, and looked at the programs that maybe hadn't. And these three were the three areas that kept coming back time and time again, saying when we've seen impact, where have we seen impact? And it was within these three pillars that we kept coming back to. Ross?
Yeah, I can see we're over time, so if we just go to the final slide. One more. Okay, so like I said, this is something that we're working on at the moment. We're looking to launch this within the next few months. We're continuing to do research into these models at the moment. We're very keen for collaboration. So if anything we've said has piqued your interest, whether you just want to give us an opinion or share your insights, or where you think, oh, we could work together in this, please do get in touch. I mean, we can see who's been on this meeting, so we'll probably be in touch with you already if we haven't. And yes, we're very keen to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thanks very much to Ross and Amy. Really exciting work going on there. And as they said, really encourage everybody who is interested to get in touch and to get involved. Maybe time for a couple of quick questions. What about that point right back at the start of the day? You touched on this a little bit, Amy, I think, in terms of building that whole fair and equitable values into what you're doing. How are you trying to achieve that?
All of the programs would be driven by the needs of the organizations that we'll be working with. So we are not, we see the role of this as more being a facilitator in the middle. So more of a, hearing the requirements from an organization, from an NGO, hearing the skills of volunteers, and then being that link in the middle to then provide a really good set of due diligence and matching in that central point. Where we've seen where programs haven't necessarily worked was where that link in the middle has been missing, or where it hasn't been necessarily clear as to what the project was going to be, or even clear what the skills of volunteers have been from the outset. So there's a huge piece of work, or there's really important requirements around the setting out of projects at the outset. So the global standard that Ross showed earlier on is a really good starting point to show how you would set up a partnership. Actually, IVS, where I was previously, did have a small grant from the Scottish Government quite a few years ago, maybe in 2016, where we looked at partnership principles. So that is still available, and I can share it. But the gold standard also complements beyond the work that was already done by IVS. Ross, do you have anything to add?
And you laid down what you were planning to do over the coming months. What would you like to see, Ross? What's the end game here? What would you really like to see come out of this piece of work when you come up with that sort of blueprint for the future? Again, what are the values that lie at the heart of it in your mind's eye?
I'd love to be able to say that we're part of something that we're really proud of, and that anyone in this call that looks at thinks That looks really interesting. That looks like they have really paid attention. There is, you know, we've talked a lot about the pitfalls and downsides, and that we've kind of considered all of those things and developed a really forward-thinking, modern, impactful version of international volunteering that we can be really proud of. That's what I'd like to see.
Brilliant. Great summary there, and a great summary of the whole day. Appreciate that was a quick run through a very complex piece of work that you're doing. Thanks very much to Ross and Amy for doing that, and thank you to all the speakers from today. Just before I hand on to Lord McConnell to summarise, I'd just like to say personally, I hope you've enjoyed the day. I've certainly learned a tremendous amount. Thank you to everybody for attending and for your contributions, and just remember to keep feeding into this discussion. And just a couple of personal thanks to Susan Dalgetty for organising this event, and to Claire Hunter for invaluable tech support behind the scenes. But thank you to the Scottish Government and the McConnell International Foundation for putting on this excellent event, and to you all for your very thoughtful contributions. And as has been said many times, there's a lot of resources here that will be shared with you after the event that hopefully will allow you to continue with your own work and make new connections to this very significant area. So to close, I will hand back to Lord McConnell to summarise the day.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, David. It's not easy to host an event of this sort with people joining from so many different countries, so many different locations. Hold everybody's attention, keep the speakers to time, and keep it interesting at the same time as filling it full of really interesting content. So a huge thank you to David Lee for his work as a host, and obviously also to Susan and Claire behind the scenes who've kept us right technically, and in Susan's case is writing up the report that will follow, and we will make sure that report goes to everybody. We're also going to organise a smaller legacy seminar where we will talk in more detail about some of the ideas that have come forward and the principles that we could then share, and following that hopefully produce a more public, shorter, punchy report with some guidelines and ideas for the future. And we'll do that early in 2024, again with the support of the Scottish Government. And we're grateful to them and to Minister Christina McKelvie for joining us today and giving us her vision on global citizenship. I am very grateful to all the speakers for their contributions, some of them incredibly thought-provoking, all of them worthwhile, and giving us, I think, a wide range of thoughts and ideas and experiences that we can take forward into this discussion. I'm particularly grateful to Minister Vera, to Anne and to Peace for joining us from Malawi, from VSO and from Rwanda. It was very good to hear their voices as part of these panel discussions, and we definitely want to make this a discussion, a global discussion, rather than a discussion either in Scotland or in the UK alone. In the same way as when we set up the Livingston Volunteers 10 years ago, when we wanted to improve the volunteering work of other organisations rather than organise our own volunteering programmes, the McConnell International Foundation wants to be a catalyst here and a convener, so that we can bring together everybody who's doing amazing work or who's got great experience, and then collaboratively together we can improve the volunteering experience in the future, make sure that the right principles are at play, but also that many more young people have the chance not just to volunteer in their own countries, but to cross borders and learn more about the world as well. And that is the role that we see for ourselves in this discussion. I hope in that way that we have been a good convener of this early discussion. We're not in competition with anybody here. We just want to bring everybody together and and that positive session at the end there from Amy and Ross, look at what the ideas might be for the future based on all the analysis and experience that we've had before. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, from Malawi, from Rwanda, from Zambia, from Cameroon, from Ghana, and from other places too, from across the UK, and many people, of course, from Scotland. Delighted to have you all here. Amazed that more than half of you have stayed the whole 3.5 hours to the very end. I think in total we probably had about nearly 150 people joining in at some point over that 3.5 hours. We hope this is the start of a discussion, not the end of it, and we look forward to taking this issue forward and staying in communication with all of you in the months and years ahead. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day and happy volunteering.